Chapter 542. It was unknown if it was intentional or not, but Xiongqi didn't take the initiative to attack the fiend-armored Tiger Soul General. The other epic companion beasts were mostly killed by Xiongqi in a short period of time. Although Xiongqi still killed the blood-colored avatar in the end, it gave Zhou hope of killing it. I wonder if there are any other companion beasts with similar life providences? After Zhou exited the game, he went online to check and found a few. However, those companion beasts were too rare. Furthermore, they weren't much better than the fiend-armored Tiger Soul General. The most famous one was Tai Sui. That fellow had a great inauspicious life providence and had the attribute of misfortune. He was even more terrifying than the fiend-armored Tiger Soul General. From the looks of it, the fiend-armored Tiger Soul General is still considered gentle. At the very least, the skill of Jinx's master isn't too obvious. I've been carrying him for so long, but I haven't seen him jinx his master. In ancient times, didn't an emperor have a horse that jinxes his master? Others would die from being jinxed, but he managed to escape the calamity because of the jinxed horse. Zhou was purely consoling himself. If he hadn't realized that the fiend-armored Tiger Soul General had a certain restraining effect on Xiongqi, Zhou wouldn't have even thought about it. No matter how strong he was, he couldn't be stronger than a mythical pet. Leaving him alive would only be a scourge. But now, with it, Zhou had a chance of killing Xiongqi. He had no choice but to consider it further and leave the fiend-armored Tiger Soul General behind. Zhou was thinking that if the former principal and company didn't enter Torch Dragon's temple but Xiongqi's temple, it would be useless for him to kill Torch Dragon. He would have to kill Xiongqi again. When that happened, he would need the fiend-armored Tiger Soul General. Logically speaking, a companion beast will only be effective if it's summoned. At most, I won't summon him. There shouldn't be any problems, right? Zhou was also uneasy. He wasn't confident, but that was all he could do. Thankfully, there's only one Tiger Soul General. If there's another Tai Sui, I'll be dead. Zhou casually closed the webpage regarding Tai Sui. When it was time for the Golden Battle God Halberd to respawn, Zhou eagerly entered the game and fought it for 300 rounds. Finally, he relied on demonic Neonate's ancient sword to slice it apart. Ding! A crystal dropped. When Zhou took a look, he saw that it was an Essence Energy Skill Crystal. Inside the golden amber-like crystal was the shadow of a golden trident. When he picked it up and took a closer look, the game immediately gave him a notification. Insufficient stats. Life providences don't match. Life soul rejection. The series of notifications gave Zhou a headache. He used his phone to check the information on the Essence Energy Skill Crystal and realized that the Golden Battle God Halberd's Essence Energy Skill Crystal required 41 strength to use. This requirement was considered the simplest among the mythical essence energy skills that Zhou knew. There were no special stat requirements. Unfortunately, even with 41 strength, Zhou was still unable to reach it. As for the requirements of the Life Providence and Life Soul, Zhou attempted to switch to the small perfection of Wisdom. The 8 perfections Wisdom Life Providence matched, but because he didn't have a Life Soul, it didn't match. In that case, if I can condense the small perfection of Wisdom Life Soul and raise my strength to 41 points, wouldn't I be able to learn the Golden Battle God Halberd's skills? Zhou thought for a moment and felt that there was hope. Among the mythical skills that Zhou had seen, this was the one with the highest chance of learning. How can I get my strength to break through to 41? Zhou had no idea how to raise his stats. Now, Zhou had an idea. His life soul was formed by absorbing the suffix of his stats, so Zhou wondered if it could affect his stats if his life soul advanced to the perfect stage. The suffix of strength was Sun, which was later absorbed by the Defy Ancient Sovereign Life Soul. If he advanced the Defy Ancient Sovereign to the perfect stage, he wondered if it could affect his strength stat and increase his strength to 41 points. Of course, this was only Zhouwen's guess. However, he could give it a try. The Defy Ancient Sovereign was already an evolved body. With another step, it could advance to a perfect body. Now, Zhou was faced with a choice. If he decided to comprehend a life soul and wait to absorb the golden battle god halberd crystal, he couldn't let the dungeon respawn. Otherwise, the skill crystals would be gone. If he wanted to continue grinding mythical companion eggs, he could only give up on the skill crystals. The drop rate of mythical creatures is still relatively high. I should grind companion eggs first. Zhou thought for a moment and decided to grind companion eggs first. After all, with the golden battle god halberd, he could kill Torch Dragon. This was the most important thing now. After putting down the golden battle god halberd crystal, Zhou made another trip to the Cursed Demon Palace. It wasn't easy for him to kill Medusa, and 2 crystals dropped. One was a speed stat, while the other was a constitution stat. They both exceeded 70 points, but to Zhou they were useless. After grinding all the rare dimensional creatures and keeping the companion eggs that dropped for fusion, Zhou had nothing to do. He had to wait until the golden battle god halberd and Medusa respawn tomorrow. Taking advantage of this period of time, Zhou took the book he borrowed from the library and continued studying it. The small perfection of wisdom hadn't condensed a life soul, so Zhou wanted to take this opportunity to study it and get the small perfection of wisdom's life soul out. It would be easier for him to absorb the golden battle god halberd's skill crystal in the future. With the golden battle god halberd and the golden battle god skill, he didn't believe that he couldn't kill Torch Dragon. There were 2, 3, and 6 types of wisdom of wisdom. Common wisdom of wisdom and non-common wisdom of wisdom, reality wisdom and observation wisdom, worldly wisdom and transcendent wisdom. These were the 2 types of wisdom of wisdom. Reality, observation, and a word were the 3 types of wisdom of wisdom. The 6 types of wisdom referred to reality wisdom, realm wisdom, word wisdom, convenience wisdom, dependent wisdom, and observation wisdom, which was also the diamond wisdom. However, Zhou life providence was the 8 perfections wisdom, 2 more than the 6 types of wisdom of wisdom. Zhou had done a lot of research, but he didn't figure out what the 8 perfections wisdom meant. Therefore, he failed to comprehend the profundities of the small perfection of wisdom and condense a life soul. Zhou vaguely felt that this small perfection of wisdom was somewhat different from the real wisdom of wisdom. The 3-faced Buddha in small Buddha temple was somewhat different from the Buddhas in ordinary monasteries. Just as he was pondering, his phone rang again. This time, it was Wang Lu. "Zhou, I'm hungry," Wang Lu said. "Isn't it noon?" Zhou asked. "You owe me so much breakfast. Didn't you say that you would use lunch to make up for it? Don't tell me you're going back on your word? Hurry up and take me to eat." "I'm starving," Wang Lu said. Chapter 543. Since you've already come out by yourself, why don't you buy your own food? Zhou handed the food he had bought from the cafeteria to Wang Lu. "Can't I do it because I like it?" Wang Lu took the food and sat on the flower bed to eat. Zhou also sat down by the side and started munching on his Rigiamo. "Zhou, what plans do you have after graduation? With your relationship with the infamily, you should be able to directly enter the Sunset Legion, right?" Wang Lu asked Zhou as she chewed on her bread. "No, I plan on returning to my hometown." Zhou had never planned on entering the Sunset Legion. Zhou really planned on returning to his hometown after graduation. He had seen quite a number of dungeons. He had even cleared 2 West District dungeons. However, there were very few dimensional zones like the ancient sovereign city. The strongest creature in the ancient sovereign city was only at the legendary stage. It looked like a very weak dimensional zone. However, there were very few dimensional zones that had stone sabers that could be seen but not touched in-game. Chess Mountain also had a similar jade box, but everyone knew how terrifying Chess Mountain was. Zhou had a nagging feeling that ancient Imperial City wasn't that simple. Therefore, he wanted to return to Guide City after graduation. Your hometown is Guide City, right? There aren't any famous dimensional zones there, so there aren't many opportunities for development. Wang Lu paused and said jokingly, "Why don't you consider going to the capital after graduation? That way you can repay your debts nearby." Wang Lu came from the capital's Wang family, a different family from Luoyang's Wang family. It's still early. We'll talk about it when the time comes. Zhou thought that there was still a long time before graduation. Perhaps the dimensional zone's restrictions wouldn't work before he graduated. When that happened, it wouldn't be up to him to decide where he would go. He could only take one step at a time. Then, if you have nowhere to go in the future, remember to look for me in the capital. Our Wang family welcomes talents very much. Furthermore, as an old classmate of mine, I can more or less take care of you, Wang Lu said with a smile. All right, Zhou replied with a nod. Not far away, a few students were sitting on the grass to rest. Have you heard? Someone discovered a gold burial ground in the dungeon. What's a gold burial ground? You don't even know what a gold burial ground is? It's the legendary kind where you bury a piece of gold, and after a while, that piece of gold will turn into 2 pieces of gold. It must be fake. Only ignorant women and children would believe such a ridiculous thing. Don't doubt me. I don't know if there was a gold burial ground in the past, but after the dimensional storms, someone really discovered it. Furthermore, it was confirmed that the gold burial ground does have magical powers. This person is even a celebrity in our federation. Who? It's the hero of the Xia family. Really? Why haven't I heard of it before? Are you making it up? What do you mean I made it up? There was more than one hero present at that time. However, that place was discovered by the hero of the Xia family, and only he believed in the legend of the gold burial ground. Therefore, only he buried things down, and in the end, only he reaped the harvest. What did he bury? He buried a sword, and then he dug out 2 swords. Can you guess which 2 swords they are? You must have heard of the names of those 2 swords. No way. Could it be the famous twin dragon swords of the Xia family? That's right. Back then, the Xia family's hero buried the dragon blood sword's companion egg in the gold burial ground. When we dug it up the next day, the dragon blood sword's companion egg turned into 2. The students chatted enthusiastically as if there was really something good going on. Senior, you said that the gold burial ground was discovered in the dungeon. Where is it? Wang Lu listened for a while before running over to ask for information. If others ask, I definitely won't tell them. However, since you're so beautiful, I might as well tell you. That place is in the underground ancient city we often go to. However, it's useless for you to go now. I heard that the gold burial ground can only bury things once. It's useless to bury things again. According to the senior who discovered the gold burial ground, when he was killing dimensional creatures, he accidentally dropped the dimensional crystals dropped by dimensional creatures. When he dug again, he dug out 2 identical dimensional crystals. The senior was very talkative as he explained the matter clearly. Thank you, senior, Wang Lu thanked him. Junior, don't be in such a rush to leave. Do you want me to take you there? The senior said warmly when he saw that Wang Lu was beautiful. There's no need, senior. Thank you, Wang Lu said as she returned to the flower bed. You don't have anything else to do in the afternoon, right? Let's go take a look. Who knows, there might really be a gold burial ground, Wang Lu said to Zhou. Didn't they say that the gold burial ground can only bury things once? Then what's the point of us going? Zhou said. Let's go take a look. The gold burial ground can only bury things once. It's just a legend. Who knows, it might still be useful. Wang Lu pulled Zhou towards the underground ancient city. The underground ancient city that the students were talking about was actually the ancient city of the dimensional zone at the top. Although there were many dimensional creatures there, most of them were at the mortal stage. The strongest was only at the legendary stage. Therefore, ordinary students would usually go there to learn how to hunt dimensional creatures. There were quite a number of people who went. However, the dimensional creatures there didn't drop anything particularly good, so students with some strength wouldn't choose to stay there for long. When Wang Lu and Zhou Wen arrived at the underground ancient city, they realized that there were many students here. They were all searching for something in the dilapidated ancient city. They had definitely heard of the legend of the gold burial ground and had come here to try their luck. So many people are looking for the gold burial ground. Even if there's really one, it's already been occupied countless times. Let's go back. Zhou Wen was still thinking about how to condense a life soul for his small perfection of wisdom. He really didn't wish to waste time on such an ethereal matter. That might not be the case. How do you know there's no chance if you don't try? Wang Lu sized up Zhou Wen and looked at his feet. Give me your shoe. What for? Zhou Wen looked at her in puzzlement. Take off your right shoe and give it to me. You'll know in a while, Wang Lu urged. Zhou Wen took off his right shoe and gave it to her. Wang Lu picked up the shoe and did a prayer before throwing it into the sky. After the shoe landed, Wang Lu pointed in the direction of the shoe and said, "Let's look over there." Will this really work? Zhou Wen put on his shoe and followed Wang Lu forward. Let's give it a try. Perhaps it will work, Wang Lu said. The two of them walked all the way into the ancient city. This ancient city was really too shabby. Many of the walls were made of brick. After the erosion of time, they looked full of potholes and dust everywhere. No matter how you looked at it, it didn't look like an ancient city, but more like a village. As they walked, one of the earrings on Wang Lu's head dropped. After it fell to the ground, it bounced into a fist-sized hole beside it. Chapter 544. Let me do it. Zhou Wen squatted down and reached into the hole. The hole was a hole by the wall. It was probably dug out by something like a rat. As there weren't any powerful dimensional creatures here, Zhou Wen didn't activate Truth Listener. The hole wasn't deep either. Zhou Wen reached out and touched it. It didn't take long for him to reach the bottom. Soon, he touched something and took a look. It was indeed the ear stud that Wang Lu had dropped. However, what was strange was that Wang Lu had dropped an ear stud, but Zhou Wen had found two identical ear studs. Zhou Wen was somewhat surprised as he looked at Wang Lu's other ear. There was also an identical ear stud. He couldn't help but ask, "How many ear studs did you drop?" "One," Wang Lu answered. "Then why are there two identical ear studs here? Could it be?" Zhou Wen looked at the hole in disbelief, that it was the legendary gold burial ground. Wang Lu took the two ear studs and looked at them carefully. "Soon," she said with certainty, "these two ear studs are identical. Even the spot where I accidentally scratched them is identical. From the looks of it, we have really found the legendary gold burial ground. Quick, use something to try it again." Zhou Wen was somewhat hesitant. Wang Lu's luck was good to discover the gold burial ground, but his luck had never been good. Furthermore, he had a nagging feeling that the gold burial ground was somewhat odd. It wasn't easy finding the gold burial ground. "Don't you want to give it a try?" Wang Lu asked Zhou Wen in puzzlement. Before Zhou Wen could answer, he saw a figure rush over. He was originally searching for the gold burial ground nearby. When he heard Zhou Wen and Wang Lu's conversation, he rushed over. Without waiting for Zhou Wen and Wang Lu to react, he stuffed a companion egg into the hole. "I say, isn't it a little rude of you?" Zhou Wen said with a frown as he looked at the student. "Good things naturally have to be shared with everyone. We are all classmates, so why bother? At most, you can use it later." The person looked up as he spoke. "It's you." Zhou Wen met the person's eyes and immediately recognized him. This person's name was Li Yu. Previously, Zhou Wen had set up a stall at the school's trading market to sell companion eggs. Back then, there were two students who had set up stalls beside him. One was Huang Ji and the other was Li Yu. Back then, Zhou Wen had a small conflict with Li Yu because of Gu Dian, causing Li Yu to suffer a little. He never expected to encounter him again today. So it's you, Zhouwen. You caused me so much trouble the last time. This time, let me use the gold burial ground first. We're even. Liu asked with a grin, how long will it take for this gold burial ground to take effect? Zhouwen couldn't be bothered to argue with him, so he replied, the earring just dropped, so there were 2 when I took it out again. Legend has it that it takes a night to bury it. I was worried about how to spend such a long time, but it turns out that it can be done so quickly, Liu said as he put his hand into the hole. After touching it a few times, Liu's expression suddenly changed. His originally squatting body suddenly turned into a kneeling position. His face was almost pressed against the side of the hole, and half of his arm was stretched out, feeling around inside. Where's my companion egg? Liu's expression was extremely ugly. He touched the hole several times, but he didn't find anything. Is it gone? Zhouwen activated Truth Listener and listened into the hole. The hole wasn't very deep to begin with, so he could hear everything that was going on inside very clearly. There was a tiny hole about 40 centimeters deep. There were no forks inside, nor were there any companion eggs. That's impossible? I clearly put it in. It's definitely inside. Why is it gone? Liu anxiously reached out to touch it, but there was nothing inside. It was naturally impossible for him to touch it. Zhouwen also found it odd. He had seen Liu put the companion egg in with his own eyes. Why was it gone? Are you guys deliberately messing with me? That companion egg is the company's, not mine. Stop fooling around. Return it to me. I know I was in the wrong. Can't I compensate you? Liu was anxious. Since he couldn't find it, he stood up and bowed to Zhouwen and Wang Lu. Don't spout nonsense. We didn't take your companion egg. You were the one who insisted on putting it in. Who can you blame? Wang Lu curled her lips and said. Liu suffered in silence. He also knew that Zhouwen and Wang Lu's identities were extraordinary, so he didn't dare mess with them. Wang Lu, give me an ear stud. Zhouwen extended his hand in front of Wang Lu. Wang Lu gave him an ear stud. Zhouwen threw the ear stud into the hole and listened with Truth Listener, but there was no reaction. It was just an ordinary hole. He reached in and touched it. There was still only one ear stud. It's indeed a little strange, Zhouwen said with a frown as he looked at the ear stud in his hand. This hole clearly replicated my ear stud. Why did it suddenly fail? It's indeed a little strange, Wang Lu said. Zhouwen shook his head slightly. That's not what I'm talking about. The news can spread because someone discovered the gold burial ground. In other words, that person used the gold burial ground and knew its effect. That's why he could spread the news. However, since he used the gold burial ground, if it's really effective, he should be constantly burying things in it. Why would he spread such important news? What you said makes sense. Since he spread the news, it must mean that the gold burial ground is no longer useful. Or rather, there's something wrong with the gold burial ground. Liu also reacted as he thumped his chest and stamped his feet. He regretted not having thought of this ahead of time. He had even taken the company's epic companion egg in. He was truly blinded by greed. My earring was clearly duplicated, and his companion egg disappeared. Doesn't that mean that the gold burial ground does exist? Furthermore, it does have an effect. However, there's a problem? Wang Lu said as she looked at the hole. Is there any way to retrieve my companion egg? Liu asked Wang Lu as though he was grasping at straws. I don't know. Try again. Wang Lu shook her head. Liu couldn't care less. He knelt by the side of the hole and placed some of his miscellaneous items in. After a while, he took them out again, but it was useless. There were no more or less items. This was also within Zhouwen's expectations. This was an ordinary hole. He had been listening for a long time. There was nothing around the hole, nor were there any energy fluctuations. Wang Lu, can you find it again? Zhouwen asked Wang Lu. Sure, but this will be the last time today. Give me your shoe, Wang Lu said. Can't I use something else to replace it? Zhou had no choice but to take off his shoe and give it to Wang Lu. No. Wang Lu took the shoe and threw it into the air. The shoe landed, but this time, it pointed in a different direction. It wasn't the direction of the hole. Chapter 545. This time, when the two of them walked forward again, Zhou raised Truth Listener's ability to its limits and constantly scanned his surroundings. After walking for a while, Zhou discovered a strange place. Under a mud wall, there was a place that Truth Listener couldn't hear. It seemed to be isolated by something, and he couldn't hear a single sound. And the direction Zhou and company were walking in was the direction of that area. Zhou used his eyes to take a look and saw that there was indeed a hole under the mud wall. It was similar to the previous hole, but this hole was clearly different. Even Truth Listener couldn't hear what was happening inside. Zhou signaled Wang Lu with his eyes before looking in the direction of the hole. Wang Lu looked at the hole, but she couldn't see anything wrong with it. She only felt that the hole was very similar to the previous one. Could this hole also be the legendary gold burial ground? Why don't we try using something first? Zhou deliberately said loudly to Wang Lu. Zhou had a nagging feeling that there was something wrong with this gold burial ground. Not only could it teleport, but it had also devoured Li Yu's companion egg. As for the item it had replicated, it was an earring with very low practical value. No matter how he thought about it, something was amiss. What if the thing we put in disappears like that person's companion egg? Wang Lu said cooperatively. It's fine. Let's give it a try first. I remember that you have a mythical companion egg, right? Try using an unimportant companion egg or item. If there's no problem, put the mythical companion egg in, Zhou said to Wang Lu with a blink. Is that so? All right then. Wang Lu touched her pocket knowingly and took out something. She placed it in the hole. Zhou kept observing the hole. After Wang Lu placed the item in, there was immediately a strange energy fluctuation in the hole. Unfortunately, Zhou could only sense the energy fluctuations and not hear what was happening inside. However, as long as he could sense that there was something unusual in the hole, he could lock onto it. He wasn't afraid that it would run away. Zhou didn't believe that it could be faster than his saber. After a while, the energy fluctuations in the hole gradually stopped. The hole still had a shielding force, preventing Zhou from hearing what was happening inside. Zhou signaled Wang Lu with his eyes. Only then did Wang Lu squat down. As she reached into the hole, she said, I wonder if this is the gold burial ground. It should be done, right? As she spoke, Wang Lu had already taken out the item from the hole. Zhou had seen the item she had previously placed inside. It was a very small knife. Now Wang Lu had taken out 2 knives. Wow, 1 knife turned into 2. Is this really a gold burial ground? Zhou reached out and took the tiny saber. It looked a little strange. The blade was like an orchid leaf, and the scabbard was the same. It was likely made of essence gold, and from the looks of it, it was pretty good. Zhou pulled out the knife from its scabbard as Wang Lu pulled out the knife in her hand. The 2 knives emitted a cold glint that made one's hair stand on end. They looked identical. Zhou could tell at a glance that it was a good saber, and it wasn't an ordinary one. That's right. This is really a gold burial ground. Let's quickly put the mythical companion egg in, Wang Lu said as she shot Zhou a look before looking at the knife in his hand. All right, quickly put the mythical companion egg in. That way we can have 2 mythical companion eggs. When the time comes, 1 for you and 1 for me. As Zhou spoke, he seemed to think of something and suddenly changed his words. Let's wait a little. The second time we put something in, it disappeared. To be safe, let's try again. With that said, Zhou placed the knife in his hand into the hole. Then, he continued using Truth Listener to observe the situation in the cave. The strange energy fluctuation in the cave stirred again, but this time, Zhou clearly felt that the strange energy fluctuation was much weaker. Not only was it weak, but it was also very unstable. Gradually, Zhou realized that he could vaguely hear some commotion in the cave that Truth Listener couldn't hear at all. It was as though something was moving inside. This time, the energy fluctuation clearly lasted longer than the previous time. After a while, the strange energy in the cave decreased significantly. Zhou could roughly hear the situation in the cave. Zhou realized that there was a tiny beast in the cave. He couldn't tell what it was. It looked a little like a squirrel, but it wasn't completely the same. Rather than calling it a rat, it looked much better than a rat. Its body was slender, and its eyes were huge. Its tail was also very large and fluffy. Is this fellow a marten? However, martens shouldn't live inside the mud wall. They should be in the forest, right? Could it be a weasel? Zhou had never seen a weasel before, but the more he thought about it, the more likely it was. At that moment, the tiny beast held the knife with its two glowing claws. Its eyes were wide open as it stared at the void in front of it like two small light bulbs. A strange light shot out from its eyes. It was like a three-dimensional printer in a sci-fi movie. The light actually printed a sheathed knife out of thin air. Although Truth Listener couldn't hear the trajectory of the photon's flow, it could sense an energy fluctuation shoot out from its eyes before gradually molding the knife in the air. The blade of the knife was already complete, but the handle was still lacking. The tiny beast seemed to be lacking in primordial energy. The fluctuations that shot out from its eyes were intermittent, as though they would disappear at any moment. The tiny beast's fur stood on end as though it had gone mad. It desperately shot out light from its eyes and finally completed the last part of the knife's handle. Clang! The knife fell to the ground along with the knife in its claws. The two knives were identical, and there was no difference. As for the tiny beast, it sprawled its limbs in exhaustion. It lay in the hole and stuck out its tongue as it panted desperately through its nose. It looked like it had expended a lot of energy. It should be done, right? Zhou muttered to himself before reaching into the cave. The tiny beast immediately lay down and dragged its exhausted body to the back of the cave. Zhou reached out and took out the two knives. He even unsheathed them and compared them. Indeed, they were identical without any difference. It's really identical. Quickly take out the mythical companion egg and put it in. As Zhou spoke, he noticed that the tiny beast's eyes lit up in the cave. Even its ears pricked up, filled with anticipation and excitement. Isn't the companion egg with you? Wang Lu retorted. No way. I thought it was with you. Didn't you bring it? Zhou said, pretending to be surprised. No, I thought you brought it. What do we do now? Wang Lu asked. Then let's come again next time, Zhou said as he turned around and left. Wang Lu followed him. The tiny beast in the cave was instantly stunned. After a full second, it suddenly screamed and crawled out of the cave. Chapter 546. The little beast transformed into a stream of light as it screamed and charged at Zhou. Unfortunately, it had expended too much essence energy. Zhou circulated the demonic astral wheel with one hand and a powerful suction force sucked the little beast into his palm. No matter how it struggled, it couldn't escape. The reason why Zhou didn't attack it directly was that he felt that the little beast was proficient in earth escape. If it were to burrow underground, it would be difficult to capture it. Now that it had rushed out and left the ground, it was naturally for the best. Forget it. Let it go. It hasn't hurt anyone. It only cheated some things, Wang Lu said. Zhou thought for a moment and felt that the chances of a companion egg dropping from killing the little beast wasn't high. Since he had already obtained two knives, it didn't matter if he let it go. The power of the demonic astral wheel dissipated as the little beast flashed and landed on the ground, vanishing without a trace. It really knows earth escape. Zhou was somewhat envious. Earth escape was very practical, even more so than flying. Unfortunately, there were very few places that produced it. If he wanted to learn it, he had to rely on luck. He couldn't buy it even if he had money. That little beast is about to die of exhaustion from replicating your 2 knives. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been caught by me so easily. What knife is this? Zhou asked as he returned the 2 knives to Wang Lu. You have the bamboo blade yourself, but you don't recognize the orchid blade of the 4 gentlemen blades? Wang Lu said to Zhou in surprise. You said that this knife is the orchid blade of the 4 gentlemen blades? Zhou immediately knew that he had underestimated the little beast. He originally imagined that it was only an ordinary essence gold saber. It wasn't surprising that the little beast could replicate it, but he never expected it to be the orchid blade of the 4 gentlemen blades. Zhou had the bamboo blade, so he knew that the 4 gentlemen blades were indeed extraordinary. Its toughness was comparable to the body of a mythical creature. It was an extremely rare essence gold weapon. Outside the game, Zhou used the bamboo blade more than the Overlord sword. This was because although the Overlord sword's sword beam was powerful, the sword was too weak. If it collided with powerful forces, it might very well snap. As for the bamboo blade, it didn't have any such problems. Even in battles with mythical creatures, it had never been damaged. Just this point alone was enough to prove how precious the 4 gentlemen blades were. The orchid blade came from the same furnace as the bamboo blade, so their quality should be about the same. However, it was a little smaller. The little beast was actually able to replicate the orchid blade. Its ability was truly abnormal. However, Zhou had heard that the 4 gentlemen blades would bring a bad fate to their owners. Now that 1 orchid blade had become 3, he didn't know if Wang Lu's luck could withstand the inauspiciousness brought by the 3 orchid blades. Zhou shook his head and said, I'm not as lucky as you. I've been unlucky enough recently. How am I to survive after taking the orchid blade? You should keep it for yourself. However, Wang Lu stuffed the orchid blade into Zhou hand. Look carefully. Although the replica is very similar to the real one, there are still some differences. This replica orchid blade definitely doesn't have the ominous problem of the real orchid blade. Zhou then stuffed the orchid blade into his hand. Take a closer look. Although the replica is very similar to the real 4 gentlemen blades, there are still some differences. This replica of the orchid blade definitely doesn't have the inauspicious problems of the real orchid blade. Zhou then tested the orchid blade's sharpness and toughness and realized that it was very similar to the real 4 gentlemen blades. He couldn't tell what was the difference. Seeing Zhou look at her suspiciously, Wang Lu smiled and said, Don't worry and use it. I can sense that the replica definitely doesn't have any inauspicious powers. Since Wang Lu was so certain, Zhou accepted the replica orchid blade. Although it was a fake, it shouldn't be inferior to the real thing when used as a weapon. Furthermore, it wouldn't harm its owner like the real thing. With the secret of the gold burial ground solved, there was no point in staying here any longer. Zhou and Wang Lu headed for the exit of the underground ancient city. After walking for a while, Zhou realized that the tiny beast had peeked its head out from a cave in the distance and was looking at them. They were walking ahead, but this fellow didn't give up and followed them. Clearly, it wasn't willing to give up and was waiting for an opportunity to take revenge. Since the beast wasn't aggressive and it didn't harm the other students, Zhou ignored it, thinking that it wouldn't be able to keep up after leaving the dimensional zone. However, he never expected that after leaving the underground ancient city, the tiny beast would follow them out. After leaving the dimensional zone, Zhou truth listener discovered that it had been traveling underground and had followed them into the school. This fellow can actually break the seal? Zhou was somewhat surprised. After all, there were relatively few breakout creatures nowadays. Zhou remained unperturbed and pretended not to notice it. He secretly sent a message to Wang Lu, telling her to be careful. You should be careful. I believe it will definitely find you. When they parted ways in front of the dorm, Wang Lu made a face at Zhou and sent him a message. Zhou thought about it and realized that it made sense. With Wang Lu's luck, even if the tiny beast wanted revenge, it would definitely come to him and not Wang Lu. After returning to his dorm, Zhou realized that the tiny beast had indeed followed him in. It was sneakily hiding in his building, not daring to attack Zhou. From the looks of it, it knew how powerful Zhou was and didn't dare fight him to the death. All it did was secretly find an opportunity to take revenge. This was because it knew how to burrow underground. If he missed and it escaped underground, it wouldn't be easy to attack it again. Zhou pretended not to see it and waited for it to leave the ground before taking action. He lay in bed and played with his phone. He slowly drank the herbal tea he brewed. Although his body had been in good condition recently and he had used less blood, he still needed to maintain his health. There was no harm in being prepared. What if he needed to bleed profusely in the future? As Zhou grinded, he waited for the tiny beast to deliver itself to him. However, the tiny beast was very careful. It hid in a corner behind a wardrobe and peeked around. It didn't dare come over. Seeing that it still didn't dare come over while he was gaming, Zhou switched off his phone and lay in bed, pretending to sleep. The tiny beast was just too careful. After Zhou pretended to sleep for a while, it quietly crawled over and burrowed under his bed. Zhou originally imagined that the tiny beast would attack him at that moment. Once it left the ground, he would grab it. However, to his surprise, the beast suddenly changed its target when it arrived under Zhou's bed. It pounced at something under his bed. Zhou listened carefully. The tiny beast had pounced on a metal lump and hugged it with its tiny claws. It opened its mouth and gnawed at it, producing crunching sounds. Only then did Zhou recall that they had taken the treasure map from the Earth Temple and gone to dig for treasure. In the end, a dimensional doll appeared in Zhou's treasure map. He didn't know what kind of plant-type dimensional creature it was. Later, when he saved the doll, it gave him a metal lump that resembled a walnut. Zhou studied it for a long time but failed to figure out what it was. He casually threw it under the bed. Chapter 547. The little beast originally wanted to sneak an attack on Zhou, but after discovering the metal walnut-like object, it gave up on the plan. It sprawled on the metal walnut-like object and chewed on it. Zhou saw that its teeth were emitting sparks as it gnawed on the metal walnut-like object, but it failed to chew through its skin. This fellow must be someone who knows his stuff. Could it be that the metal walnut-like object is really something good? After studying it for a period of time, Zhou failed to figure out what the metal walnut-like object was. He imagined that it was a special piece of metal and planned on finding an opportunity to melt it to make a knife. However, from the looks of it, the little beast actually wanted to eat the metal walnut-like object. Zhou felt that the metal walnut-like object wasn't as simple as a piece of metal. The little beast was good at cloning, so it definitely had seen many treasures. Furthermore, it knew Earth escape, so what metal couldn't it find underground? It definitely didn't want to eat the metal outside the metal walnut-like object. It was likely that there was something inside that made it forget about revenge. With its cautious personality, it actually dared to cause such a commotion under Zhou's bed. Clearly, the item inside the metal walnut-like object was extremely attractive to it, making it lose its rationality. Zhou got off the bed, lifted the bed sheets, and looked inside. He saw the little beast still lying on the metal walnut-like object, as though it was possessed. It didn't even know that Zhou was looking at it as it continued gnawing on it. Zhou reached out and picked it up. However, the little beast's foreclaws were firmly gripping the metal walnut-like object. No matter how hard Zhou pulled, he couldn't move it. He pulled the metal walnut-like object out, but the little beast didn't loosen its claws. From the looks of it, the item inside this metal walnut-like object is really extraordinary. Zhou released his grip. The little beast didn't run as it continued gnawing on the metal walnut-like object. This guy is really greedy. Zhou shook his head. Humans die for wealth, and birds die for food. This little beast was willing to sacrifice its life for a metal walnut-like object. Its intelligence was truly worrying. Since the little beast couldn't chew on it, Zhouwen ignored it and let it slowly chew on it. Zhouwen carefully studied the metal walnut-like object. Truth listener's power couldn't hear what was inside the metal walnut. It seemed to be solid, and Dr. Darkness's light of penetration couldn't penetrate the metal. Zhouwen didn't sense any special energy fluctuations from the metal walnut. This left him puzzled. He didn't know what was inside such a lump of metal. Zhouwen tried slashing with Overlord's sword, but the sword beam with Ever Victorious only left a white mark on the metal walnut. After a while, Zhouwen realized that the tiny beast had left a shallow bite mark on the metal walnut. At this rate, it was unknown how long it would take to chew through the metal walnut. The little beast didn't know that it had run away. It just gnawed on it greedily. After some thought, Zhouwen placed the metal walnut and the little beast into the chaos space. Inside the primal chaos space, the little critter was still hugging the iron walnut and gnawing on it non-stop. It was as if it was possessed. It wasn't time for the golden battle god halberd to respawn. Zhouwen picked up a Buddhist scripture and thought as he read. Could it be that the 8 degrees correspond to the 8 senses? The 600 volumes of the Great Perfection of Wisdom Sutra are condensed into the Diamond Sutra, and the Diamond Sutra is condensed into the Heart Sutra. It can be said that the Heart Sutra is the essence of the Great Perfection of Wisdom, and its true meaning is about the 8th sense, the heart body. It's also known as the Gautama Sutra or the Araya sense. However, this is the concept and essence of the Great Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. The one I cultivate is called the Small Perfection of Wisdom. It seems a little different. Zhouwen thought for a moment and felt that something was amiss. He went to read other information. Even when it was time for the golden battle god halberd to respawn, he failed to come to a conclusion. He went to grind the golden battle god halberd and Medusa, but after spending a great deal of effort, they only dropped stat crystals. It made Zhouwen suspect if the orchid blade replica had affected his luck. Xing said that there's a 1/3 chance. It should drop next time, right? Although Zhouwen was anxious, he didn't have a good solution. All he could do was wait until tomorrow. He grinded the rare dimensional creatures again. This time, his luck wasn't bad. Another 3-eyed golden warrior companion egg dropped. Zhouwen hatched it and planned to use it when he fused with it in the future. After grinding once, Zhouwen began studying his life providence, 8 perfections wisdom. Only by condensing a life soul with the 8 perfections wisdom could he learn the golden battle god halberd's skills. Zhouwen, do you have time? Come with me to Dragon Gate Grotto. Li Xian suddenly came to Zhouwen. Recently, Li Xian had been cultivating with all his might and rarely came out. For him to take the initiative to look for Zhouwen, something must have happened. Yes, Zhouwen agreed immediately. The two of them arranged to meet in front of Dragon Gate Research. When Zhouwen arrived, he realized that apart from Li Xian, Feng Qiuyan and Gu Dian from the Xianwen Club were there. Ming Xiu was also there. Zhouwen, you're here too. I'll explain the situation first before we enter. Li Xian recounted what had happened. Li Xian had been cultivating hard recently and had gone to many dimensional zones to train his combat abilities. When he was in Dragon Gate Grotto's southernmost cave, he discovered a strange dimensional creature he had never seen before. When fighting the dimensional creature, Li Xian had nearly been killed. Thankfully, he had escaped. He had invited them over to take a look and see if there was a chance of killing the dimensional creature. According to Li Xian's description, the dimensional creature was somewhat different from the typical dimensional creatures in Dragon Gate Grotto. The typical dimensional creatures in Dragon Gate Research were warriors, Vajras, fairies, and stone beasts. However, that dimensional creature looked as ugly and terrifying as a devil. When they arrived outside the southernmost cave, Li Xian said to Zhouwen and company, "You aren't familiar with that dimensional creature. Don't take action yet. I'll fight it first. You guys observe from the side. It's best if you can think of a way to restrain it. It won't be too late to take action then. Zhou Wen, Feng Qiuyan, Gu Dian, and Ming Xiu nodded to express their understanding. The 5 of them entered the southernmost cave together. There were some warriors in the southernmost cave, but they weren't as strong as the Vajra warriors of Myriad Buddha Cave. The 5 of them easily stormed in, and when they arrived at a cave, they saw a 3-headed, 6-armed monster with a body that resembled black iron rush out of the cave. Zhou Wen saw the dimensional creature's 3 heads. Each face was more ferocious and terrifying than the other. All of them looked like evil ghosts. The only difference was that the middle head had a single horn, while the other 2 heads had 2 and 3 horns respectively. Each of its 6 hands held a bangle. The bangle was as thick as a baby's arm. It glowed with a resplendent golden light as though it was made of gold. There were many mysterious patterns engraved on it. I just want to play games in peace. I just want to play games in peace. Chapter 548. Li Xian directly used his life soul. His body was tightly wrapped in a black carapace, and his eyes turned red. It looked like his entire bearing was different from usual, turning sinister. Li Xian was very fast, leaving behind afterimages as he rushed in front of the monster. His body swayed left and right as he dodged the monster's ring strike. The epic companion beast's saber in his hand slashed at the monster's body, but it was blocked by the ring. The monster was indeed very strong. The 6-hoop used a strange move, preventing Li Xian's saber from touching it. All he could do was constantly shift his position. Li Xian's movement techniques and moves were very exquisite. He looked like he was using them beautifully. It could be said to be textbook perfection without any flaws. However, Zhou Wen had a nagging feeling that this wasn't Li Xian. The Li Xian he knew wasn't a person who pursued perfection. If he hadn't seen Li Xian charge forward, Zhou Wen would have imagined that the person in the carapace was Li Maobai. Is it really good to change like this? Zhou Wen frowned slightly. If a person pursued a goal that he didn't like, Zhou Wen didn't know how far he could go. Li Xian's moves are very powerful. I can't find any flaws, but I have a nagging feeling that something is amiss, Feng Qiuyan said in thought as he watched Li Xian fight the monster. Ming Xiu nodded and said, I also find it a little strange. It's very strong, but there's something amiss. I remember seeing Li Xian fight before. He doesn't seem to have such a style, right? Coach, what do you think? Feng Qiuyan asked Zhou Wen. Not everyone knows how to walk their own path when they are born. They have to slowly try. Some people will quickly find their own path. Some people walk their entire lives, but they might only walk in circles on the wrong path. Actually, I don't know which path is right or wrong. Li Xian's path ultimately has to be walked by himself. I believe that no matter how difficult the path is, he will definitely be able to walk it, Zhou Wen said. Clang, clang, clang. Li Xian's saber constantly clashed with the monster's golden hoop, but Li Xian kept retreating. The monster's strength and speed were above his. His saber couldn't break through the golden hoop's defense at all. Instead, he was forced to constantly retreat. After watching for a while, Zhou Wen roughly understood that the monster was an epic strength and constitution type. Its body was extremely powerful, and with its immense strength, even with Zhou Wen's constitution, he was probably only on par with it. Li Xian's family had abundant resources, so he had a large number of stat crystals for him to use. It hadn't been long since he advanced to the epic stage, so all his stats were almost maxed out. However, he couldn't see his stats. Zhou Wen estimated that his basic stats were about 40 points. Even if they weren't there, they were at least 38 or 39. Logically speaking, Li Xian cultivated in the invincible connate divine art, so he shouldn't be at a disadvantage in terms of constitution and strength. However, his pursuit of perfection in his moves resulted in him constantly being pushed back by the monster. It's about time. Let's attack, Gu Dian said. Wait a little longer. I want to take another look. Zhou Wen stopped them and watched Li Xian continue fighting. Gu Dian didn't ask why. Feng Qiuyan and Ming Xiu stopped and continued watching the battle from outside. Old Zhou, it's about time. Hurry up and attack, Li Xian shouted at Zhou as he retreated. Such a weak dimensional creature shouldn't need us to do anything, right? Zhou said with a smile. Bullsh *t. If I don't need you to do anything, why would I call you here? Li Xian cursed. Zhou said with a grin, didn't you call us here to let us admire your heroism in killing monsters? I understand. Understand my ass. Hurry up and attack. I can't hold on any longer. Li Xian had already been forced to a corner of the cave with no path of retreat. Are you lying to me again? Zhou stood firmly outside the cave, refusing to enter. Since Zhou didn't move, Feng Qiuyan, Ming Xiu, and Gu Dian didn't move either. Li Xian had already been forced to the point where he didn't have the time to bicker with Zhou. Crack! With nowhere to retreat, Li Xian, who was leaning against the stone wall, was struck in the arm by the monster's golden hoop. The carapace on his body cracked and his bones seemed to have fractured. His left arm immediately drooped down. Thankfully, Li Xian's movement technique was good enough. Otherwise, the strike would have hit his head. Old Zhou, stop playing. Are you trying to kill me? Li Xian rolled to the side in a sorry state as he shouted. I'm not playing. The Li Xian I know doesn't need help killing such a dimensional creature, right? Zhou said with a smile. Li Xian didn't say a word as his movement technique constantly changed. He brandished his saber with his other hand and circled the monster, but it wasn't enough when he had two hands. It was even worse when he injured an arm. The situation became more and more dangerous. Coach, will there be danger? Ming Xiu said worriedly. It's fine. He still has strength left. Zhou knew Li Xian too well. Zhou still didn't know what life soul he had, but just his life providence wouldn't make it so easy to kill him. Or rather, he wasn't using the powers he was good at. He was escaping from his past self. He wanted to become as mature and steady as Li Mabai, able to use exquisite techniques and schemes to defeat his opponent. His talent was indeed very good, and his skill training was also very perfect. However, his personality was incompatible with his skill. This caused his skill to look very strong, but it lacked the decisive factor. Crack! Crack! More and more parts of Li Xian's carapace cracked as his injuries worsened. Coach, could something really have happened? I think Li Xian is really on the verge of death. Shall we attack? Feng Qiuyan said. All right. Seeing that Li Xian was still trying to win with his technique, Zhou knew that if this continued, he might really die. He nodded and prepared to charge in. Stop right there. No one is to come in, Li Xian suddenly said. Zhou and company stopped and watched Li Xian fight the three-headed, six-armed monster inside. He was still insisting on using his moves perfectly, but the injuries on his body were rapidly recovering. The broken carapace on his body automatically repaired itself in just a moment, and the speed of repair was getting faster and faster. In the end, the golden hoop hit him and sent him flying. In the next second, he stood up again, and the broken carapace was restored to its original state in the blink of an eye. His recovery ability is much stronger than when he was at the legendary stage. Zhou couldn't help but be surprised. Such recovery ability was almost undying. Unless it was a fatal blow, it was almost impossible to kill him. Gradually, Zhou felt that Li Xian's aura was a little different. His moves were still pursuing perfection, but they were becoming more and more evil. Chapter 549. Coach, did you notice that the strange armor on Li Xian's body seems a little strange? Feng Qiuyan said as he stared at the carapace on Li Xian's body. It's indeed a little strange. Zhou had long discovered it. Every time the carapace on Li Xian's body was shattered, it would become stronger after self-healing. When the monster smashed into his self-healing carapace again, the damage it could cause was much smaller. Furthermore, this ability didn't seem to have an upper limit. It could be repeatedly shattered. Every time it self-healed, it would become stronger. After a few consecutive shattering and self-healing, the damage caused by the monster's golden hoop hitting him was negligible. Why is Li Xian learning from Li Maobai? His life providence and life soul are born to be beaten and injured. How can he become stronger if he doesn't get beaten? It's a waste for him to learn from Li Maobai. Zhou Wen thought. Li Xian was clearly the first person to discover that there was a problem with his life soul. This was because his life soul had been condensed under Li Maobai's coercion, and he had even absorbed Li Maobai's evil King Gu. Even he didn't know much about his life soul. He even believed that it was as Li Maobai had said, that his life soul was a failure. Indeed, his life soul was different from what Li Maobai had expected. It didn't focus on the evil King Gu. It had only absorbed a portion of the evil King Gu's characteristics to form his own life soul. His life soul had some of the evil King Gu's characteristics, but it wasn't completely the same. Previously, Li Xian had blamed himself. He felt that he should grow up as soon as possible and become the family's pillar of support like Li Maobai. Therefore, he had deliberately trained himself, hoping to make himself stronger than Li Maobai. He wanted to surpass Li Maobai in all aspects, but he ended up taking a path that wasn't suitable for him. He had been training his skills during this period of time and tried his best to avoid injuries, but he didn't know that his life soul would only become stronger after being injured. He had taken so many detours for nothing. It wasn't until today that he discovered the secret of his life soul after being repeatedly injured. He couldn't help but be overjoyed. Seeking victory in the midst of defeat and establishing a kingdom that belongs to you on the ruins. Such a power is somewhat similar to a phoenix's nirvana. It's a very powerful life soul, Feng Chuyan said seriously. Anyone who fought Li Xian would be under immense pressure. If they couldn't kill him cleanly, he would become stronger the more they fought. In the end, they might be the ones to die. Zhou Wen looked at Li Xian and felt that his life soul didn't just become stronger after shattering. Zhou Wen vaguely felt that every time the carapace shattered and healed, it would gain some evil powers. The feeling was odd. Zhou Wen couldn't tell what it was, but he had a nagging feeling that something was amiss. Finally, Zhou Wen knew what was amiss. When Li Xian punched out, he realized that Li Xian's punch was somewhat similar to the monster's move. The way he released his strength was very similar to the three-headed, six-armed monster. However, if Zhou Wen remembered correctly, this move was likely a monster's primordial energy skill. It wasn't something that could be learned just by looking at it. One needed to know how to circulate primordial energy. Li Xian definitely didn't know such an essence energy skill in the past, but now that he had used it, there was only one possibility. He had learned the monster's essence energy skill while fighting the three-headed, six-armed monster. Zhou Wen couldn't help but recall something. Li Maobai had said that his life soul's name was Evil King Gu. It was a life soul formed from cultivating a secret primordial energy art in the South District. Zhou Wen had also heard of some legends that the Gu in the South District placed many different poisonous insects in a jar. Due to hunger, they constantly hunted each other. The last poisonous insect that survived was the Gu. Not only was this Gu the strongest poisonous creature, but it also possessed the abilities of other poisonous insects while hunting and devouring them. Not only did Li Xian's life soul become stronger the more it shattered, but it could also learn the enemy's primordial energy skills in battle. This was very similar to the legends of Gu. How much power did Li Xian's life soul inherit from Li Maobai's evil King Gu? Zhou Wen thought to himself. Li Xian had completely gained the upper hand. When the golden hoop struck his body, the carapace no longer cracked. It could only force Li Xian to take half a step back. Li Xian stopped dodging the monster's golden hoop. At the same time the golden hoop struck him, his saber slashed at the monster. The battle between man and monster was like a battle between two monsters. Li Xian's injuries rapidly healed after being struck by the golden hoop. As for the monster's body, It was slashed by the saber, but it couldn't heal. In the constant battle, the originally terrifying monster appeared weaker and weaker. It even felt like it was trembling. Mingxiu wore a complicated expression as he watched. He was thinking that if he were to fight Li Xian, he would probably be waiting for death if he couldn't kill Li Xian with that strike. Feng Qiuyan also frowned in thought. If he were to fight Li Xian, how could he win? After thinking for a long time, there was only one solution. Before he became stronger, he had to kill him. Crack! Feng Qiuyan's strength had clearly increased. After slashing countless times, he beheaded one of the monster's heads. The monster seemed to be afraid as it turned around and ran, not daring to fight Li Xian again. It's too late to run after hitting me so many times. Li Xian wasn't willing to give up. With a flash, he chased after it like a phantom. The monster was truly afraid. It didn't dare turn around to fight Li Xian. After Li Xian caught up to it, he slashed a few times from the back and beheaded the remaining two heads. Seeing the monster fall beside Li Xian, Zhou walked over and asked Li Xian, "Are you all right?" He had a nagging feeling that Li Xian's life soul was a little too strange. Perhaps it was because he had absorbed a portion of the evil King Gu's characteristics, but it made him feel evil. Li Xian retracted his life soul and revealed his body. He sighed softly and said, "From the looks of it, I won't be able to be an elegant scion like Li Mabai in this life. I'm ultimately just a foppish scion who doesn't care about his life." Foppish is pretty good. Zhou laughed. Since Li Xian could say that, it was obvious that he was really fine. "Sigh, so I can be very strong just by training casually. I don't need to be serious at all." Li Xian continued sighing. "That's a little too much." Zhou was rendered speechless. Just as Li Xian was about to say something, the three-headed, six-armed monster's body suddenly moved. It gave Zhou and company a fright as they stared warily at the monster's corpse. They saw light glowing in its chest as though there was a blob of golden magma churning. Boom! The corpse suddenly exploded as a golden object burst out from the corpse. When they took a careful look, they realized that it was another dimensional creature. However, it was different from the three-headed, six-armed monster. It was very normal, with only one head and a pair of arms. However, its appearance was even more terrifying than the three-headed, six-armed monster. Its entire body seemed to be made of gold, and its body was inhuman. It had 2 horns on its head, and there was a row of bone spikes on its spine. Its 10 fingers were like golden hooks, and it was only half the height of a person. Its body burned with golden light. With a wave of its hand, the 6 golden bangles that had landed on the ground automatically flew over and wrapped around its hands, feet, and neck. The remaining golden bangle landed in its hand. The golden bangle, which was about the same diameter as its height, automatically shrank and turned into the size of a bracelet and a collar. Only the golden bangle in its hand remained its original size. Sogu. Chapter 550. The golden hoop in the monster's hand suddenly threw out. The golden hoop rapidly spun as it flew towards Li Xian, who was closest to it. Li Xian didn't dare be careless. He put on his carapace again and slashed at the golden hoop with both hands. Clang! The saber struck the golden hoop, causing the front of the golden hoop to sink. However, the back of the hoop flipped over and wrapped around Li Xian's neck. This turn of events was too sudden. Coupled with the force of Li Xian's slash, it accelerated the golden hoop's rotation, preventing Li Xian from reacting. The moment the golden hoop wrapped around his neck, it suddenly shrank and wrapped tightly around his neck. Furthermore, it was constantly shrinking. The little monster didn't idle either. It flew towards Gu Dian on the other side. Its speed was unbelievably fast, even faster than the 3-headed, 6-armed monster. Gu Dian unleashed his strength and punched the little monster. The little monster's claws collided with his fist, and the hook-like claws immediately left several wounds on the back of Gu Dian's hand. Zhou and Feng Qiuyan had already drawn their sabers and slashed at the little monster. Ming Xiu also slashed out with his sword. The little monster's legs kicked at Feng Qiuyan and Ming Xiu. Its calf was too short, so it was still lacking. However, the golden hoop on its ankle flew out and expanded as it flew towards Feng Qiuyan and Ming Xiu. With Li Xian as an example, Ming Xiu and Feng Qiuyan didn't dare slash at the golden hoop. They retreated and dodged. The little monster's claws met Zhou Wen's bamboo blade. With a clang, the bamboo blade slashed at the little monster's wrist and collided with the golden hoop. The little monster was sent retreating as Zhou Wen took a few steps back. How can this guy be so strong? Zhou Wen was alarmed. In terms of pure strength, the little monster was stronger than him without any primordial energy skills. Zhou Wen's basic strength was 40. Apart from epic creatures like Truth Listener and Banana Fairy who were stronger than him, he had never seen an epic creature who could beat him in basic strength. At most, it was a draw. If the little monster didn't have a life providence and life soul that enhanced its strength, it would be rather terrifying. Feng Qiuyan and Ming Xiu dodged the golden hoop, but the golden hoop seemed to have a life of its own. It spun in the air and charged at them, forcing them to constantly dodge. The golden hoop tightened around Li Xian's neck. The carapace around his neck was already showing signs of being strangled, but the golden hoop was still shrinking. If this continued, the carapace would shatter and his neck would snap. He used his saber to slash at the golden hoop, but it was useless. No matter how hard he pulled, he couldn't stop the golden hoop from tightening. If it wasn't for Li Xian's tough carapace and strong body, anyone else would have had their necks snapped by the golden hoop. Gu Dian punched the monster again, pincer attacking with Zhou Wen. The monster's figure quickly flashed as it flicked its claws. The two golden hoops on its wrists flew out and wrapped themselves around Gu Dian and Zhou Wen. Gu Dian quickly retreated. His body looked tall, but he wasn't clumsy at all. He was extremely fast. Zhou Wen's saber slashed at the golden hoop, causing it to flip over and wrap itself around Zhou Wen's head. Zhou Wen used ghost steps to dodge and escaped the golden hoop's attack. At the same time, he brandished his saber and slashed at the monster. The monster reached out to take off the golden hoop around its neck and faced Zhou Wen's saber. Zhou Wen's transcendent flying immortal was extremely fast. The monster shouldn't have been able to withstand it, but just as Zhou Wen's saber was about to strike the monster's neck, he suddenly felt a huge suction force. The bamboo blade deviated from its trajectory uncontrollably and slammed into the golden hoop. The golden hoop was like a super magnet that sucked the bamboo blade firmly onto it. Zhou Wen tried his best to pull the saber back, but his strength wasn't as great as the monster's. The monster screamed as it pulled the golden hoop. Zhou Wen's body couldn't stabilize as he moved with it. As for the other golden hoop, it was already spinning in midair to wrap itself around his head. Zhou Wen had no choice but to give up on dodging with the bamboo blade. At the same time, he took out a small knife that resembled an orchid leaf and threw it out as a flying knife. The orchid blade transformed into a cold beam that sneaked at the monster's abdomen. However, just as it was about to stab into the monster, it was sucked in by the golden hoop. It failed to injure the monster's body. Feng Qiuyan was already at the epic stage and his movement technique was fast enough. He could dodge the golden hoop's attack, but Gu Dian and Ming Xiu hadn't advanced to the epic stage, so it was more difficult for them to dodge. Ming Xiu dodged twice before he couldn't dodge anymore. All he could do was swing his sword at the golden hoop, but the sword was instantly sucked in. All he could do was roll around lazily to avoid being caught by the golden hoop. Gu Dian grabbed the golden hoop with both hands. The golden hoop wanted to wrap around him, but he held it tightly with both hands. The golden hoop sent his body flying around the cave, causing him to be covered in injuries. Li Xian desperately pulled at the golden hoop around his neck. His carapace had already shattered and the golden hoop had sunk in. From the looks of it, he was about to suffocate. Zhou Wen didn't have time to think. All he wanted to do was kill the monster as soon as possible. Otherwise, the few of them would be in danger. He summoned the six-winged guardian dragon. Six-winged roared and slapped at the monster. Six-winged's speed was far from what the monster could compare with. Unable to dodge, the monster raised the golden hoop to meet the six-winged guardian dragon's palm. Bam! The monster and the golden hoop were slapped into the rocky ground. The six-winged guardian dragon raised its claw, but the monster jumped out again. The six-winged guardian dragon's claw failed to kill it. What's this fellow's background? Zhou was alarmed. However, the six-winged guardian dragon had already roared and spewed out a mouthful of dragon breath holy flames. Amidst the flood-like dragon breath holy flames, the golden hoop in the monster's hand spun and the holy flames were sucked into the golden hoop. The golden hoop was like a spatial door. After the dragon breath was sucked in, it vanished without a trace. Zhou was even more alarmed. He guessed that this monster was most likely a mythical creature. However, its level might not have reached the mythical stage. It was probably similar to Truth Listener and Banana Fairy. That's not right. Its situation is more like demonic neonate. Those six golden hoops are somewhat similar to demonic neonate's ancient sword. What exactly is this fellow? Zhou pondered, but his hand didn't stop. He summoned the Overlord's sword and slashed at the monster. He didn't dare use his sword to slash at the golden hoop again, afraid that the sword would be sucked in again. As the monster dodged the six-winged guardian dragon's attack, it spun the golden hoop and swallowed the sword beam that Zhou slashed out. However, its stats were ultimately too weak. When the six-winged guardian dragon slapped it, its golden body cracked and golden blood flowed out. The monster screamed repeatedly, but it couldn't withstand the six-winged guardian dragon's power. The golden hoop could only absorb attacks formed from essence energy, but it wasn't very effective against physical attack. Although it had the effect of absorbing weapons, it wasn't very effective against the six-winged guardian dragon's claws. With a swipe of its claws, the monster's body cracked apart along with the golden hoop. It immediately died. Sogu. Chapter 551. The moment the little monster died, the golden hoops immediately seemed to lose their lives. They returned to their original sizes and fell to the ground, producing clanging sounds. Six-winged guardian dragon. So that's your companion beast, coach. Ming Xiu recognized six-winged at a glance. In fact, there was no one who didn't recognize the six-winged guardian dragon. After all, it was the first companion beast on the rankings. As expected of Coach, he already has a mythical pet so quickly. Feng Qiuyan felt that it was only natural. I was lucky. I got lucky in the battle between two mythical creatures. Zhou was telling the truth. Then, he looked at Li Xian and asked, "Are you alright?" The carapace on Li Xian's neck had completely shattered. Purple marks had appeared on his neck and his bones were about to break. If he had been any later, his life providence probably wouldn't have been able to save his life. No matter how strong his recovery ability was, it would have been impossible for him to regrow his head. I'm fine. I don't know what weapon that golden hoops is. It's too terrifying. Li Xian touched his neck and gritted his teeth in pain. Thankfully, his recovery ability was too strong. Without the restrictions of the golden hoops, he healed in a moment. There were no signs of his injuries. However, this also gave Li Xian a wake-up call. Although his body and life soul were very strong, they weren't truly invincible. When faced with special attacks, no matter how strong his body and life soul's self-healing abilities were, it was useless. Zhou picked up the orchid blade, bamboo blade, and a golden hoop. Now that the golden hoop no longer had any magnetic force, the orchid blade and bamboo blade automatically separated and fell. Zhou touched the golden hoop, but there was no magnetic force. "Look," Ming Xiu said as he pointed at the little monster's corpse. The few of them looked over and saw that the little monster's golden body was rapidly melting. Soon, it turned into a pool of golden liquid. It looked like a pool of blood, but the color was somewhat different. There was a crystal left in the liquid. Zhou and company were somewhat surprised. Reality wasn't a game. Corpses couldn't be farmed. After typical dimensional creatures died, their corpses would rot faster, but it wouldn't be this fast. Typically, it would take at least 2 to 3 days to decompose. What was even stranger was that the 6 golden hoops didn't disintegrate. Logically speaking, the golden hoops were a part of the dimensional creature. Once the dimensional creature died, the golden hoops should have disintegrated as well. However, the 6 golden hoops were completely fine. They were still as strong as ever. Zhou extended his hand and sucked the golden dimensional crystal into his palm. He wiped away the golden liquid on it before throwing it to Li Xian. They were here to help Li Xian, so they naturally had to give him any gains. Li Xian didn't stand on ceremony as he caught the crystal and put it away with a grin. "Do you want these golden hoops?" Zhou asked as he pointed at the other golden hoops on the ground. "Usually, the things on a monster's body will decompose. What's the use of it? It can't really be used as a weapon," Mingxiu said. "These golden hoops seem a little special. Perhaps they won't disintegrate." Zhou attempted to inject his essence energy into the golden hoops, but there was no reaction. Mingxiu shook his head and said, "Regardless of whether it can disintegrate or not, I won't use such a ring-type weapon. It's useless even if I want it." Feng Qiuyan and Gu Dian also shook their heads, indicating that they didn't want it. Zhou didn't stand on ceremony as he picked up the golden hoops and planned on returning to study them. This thing actually had such great power in the hands of an epic creature. If it really wouldn't disintegrate and disappear, he could study how to use it. What if it could be used? After coming out this time, Li Xian returned to his previous state. He was much more relaxed and didn't feel as burdened as before. However, he didn't reduce the amount of training. He only changed his training method. In the past, he would crazily train his skills. Now, he would still train his skills, but most of the time, he would challenge relatively powerful dimensional creatures to repair his carapace and constantly improve. Zhou returned to his dorm and studied it for a while, but no matter what kind of essence energy he injected, the golden hoops didn't react. Could it be that humans really can't use the weapons of dimensional creatures? Zhou had no choice but to place the golden hoops on the table to see if they would disintegrate over time. Some dimensional creatures would disintegrate relatively slowly. Perhaps they would disintegrate and disappear in a few days. In the chaos space, the tiny beast was still gnawing at the metal walnut with all its might, but there were almost no results. There were still shallow teeth marks, and it didn't look like there was any progress. He released Banana Fairy, Truth Listener, Dr. Darkness, and Demonic Neonate for a breather. They all had some self-awareness. If they weren't released for a long period of time, they would become a little irritable, especially Demonic Neonate and Banana Fairy. If it wasn't necessary, they hated turning into tattoos. Banana Fairy lay on Zhou Wen's shoulder and watched him play the game curiously. She was eager to give it a try. Demonic Neonate hugged the ancient sword and stood in a dark corner. If one didn't pay attention, they wouldn't be able to sense her existence. Dr. Darkness was in a daze. It was unknown if he was thinking about a problem or something. In the past, Truth Listener liked to jump around the room when it came out. This time, it was abnormally quiet. Zhou didn't hear its voice. After a while, Zhou was suddenly blinded by the golden light in the room. He turned his head and saw the 6 golden hoops on the table. For some reason, they emitted a golden glow and automatically floated up. The 6 golden hoops were spinning. There seemed to be a strange power surging within them. As they spun, the golden hoops became smaller and smaller. In the beginning, they were the size of a collar or bracelet. Later on, they became the size of a ring and were constantly shrinking. Just as Zhou was feeling alarmed, he saw the 6 golden hoops descend and fly towards the table. Only then did Zhou realize that Truth Listener was standing on the table. After the 6 golden hoops landed, they flew towards Truth Listener's body. The 6 mini golden hoops were placed on Truth Listener's 6 ears. They were like 6 earrings, looking surprisingly compatible. After the 6 golden hoops were placed on it, Truth Listener's body immediately emitted a golden glow. The golden light was like silk as it gradually wrapped around its body. Soon, it turned into a golden cocoon. Is it about to evolve? Zhou was pleasantly surprised. He never expected the golden hoops to be able to make Truth Listener evolve. It was truly a pleasant surprise. After Truth Listener evolved, it would definitely be able to evolve to the mythical stage. When that happened, Zhou would have another super fighter. I wonder who's stronger after the evolution, Truth Listener or Tyrant Behemoth. Zhou was delighted. He never expected that fighting monsters would allow Truth Listener to evolve. Sogu. Chapter 552. Why haven't I encountered such dimensional creatures after going to Dragon Gate Grotto so many times in-game? After Zhou returned, he entered the game's southernmost cave to take a look, but there were only some strongmen and stone beasts. There were no such monsters. Not to mention the small golden monster, he didn't even see the big guy with 3 heads and 6 arms. Truth Listener was put away by Zhou. The process of advancing from the epic to the mythical stage was relatively long. Tyrant Behemoth hadn't completed its evolution yet, so Truth Listener probably needed quite a bit of time. He probably couldn't use it anytime soon. Losing Truth Listener's ability was equivalent to turning off the cheat of God's view. It made Zhou a little unused to it. I was a little too reliant on Truth Listener for a period of time. I can use this period of time to recover. The only thing Zhou was worried about was that Truth Listener hadn't completed its evolution before he went to Zhuolu. When the time came, he would still be at a disadvantage. When the Golden Battle God Halberd respawned, Zhou stormed into the Metalwork Temple again. With the Fire Furnace Queen and 6-winged Guardian Dragon, Zhou basically didn't need to do anything. However, Zhou still attempted to control the blood-colored avatar to fight. He switched his primordial energy art to the small perfection of wisdom and felt the changes brought to his body by the small perfection of wisdom and the 8 perfections wisdom life providence. Without Truth Listener, the 8 perfections wisdom life providence could make his 6 senses extremely sharp. Apart from his hearing being much worse than Truth Listener's, his other senses were much stronger. Zhou's nose was better than a trained police dog's. He could distinguish many smells that he couldn't identify previously. His taste buds had also become extremely sensitive. When it came to eating, he only knew the sweet, sour, bitter, and spicy flavors of food. After activating 8 perfections wisdom, he could easily distinguish certain things. The only bad thing was that the seaweed and egg drop soup in the cafeteria was delicious. However, ever since Zhou drove the 8 perfections wisdom to drink the seaweed egg drop soup, he hadn't done so again. He actually smelled the scent of a fly from the soup. His sense of taste was just too sensitive. Zhou felt that as long as he trained a little, it would be easy for him to tell the age of the wine. Of course, Zhou wasn't that bored, nor did he have the time to learn them. All he did was constantly practice using the 8 perfections wisdom. Gradually, Zhou sensed the benefits of the 8 perfections wisdom. With his sharp senses, he could discover many things that he usually couldn't. Not to mention his hearing, his eyes could see further and more meticulously. They were like binoculars, allowing him to foresee the enemy's movements. His sense of smell could also allow him to distinguish some dangers such as poisonous fog. Some odor-based toxins could not be seen with the naked eye. At this time, the sense of smell became very important. However, apart from that, the 8 perfections wisdom had no other use. Compared to the other life providences, it seemed a little too simple. It didn't have any particularly outstanding abilities and only strengthened Zhou's basic abilities. As Zhou practiced, he grinded. When demonic neonate slashed the golden battle god Halberd again, He heard a ding as a golden metal egg dropped. And Xing said that there's a 1/3 chance. He's really accurate. It dropped the first time. Zhou was overjoyed as he hurriedly looked at the companion egg stats. Golden Battle God Halberd, Mythical Life Providence, Divine Armament Life Soul, Golden Divine Light Wheel of Fortune, Mercy of the War God. Strength, 80 Speed, 72 Constitution, 79 Essence Energy, 68 Talent Skill, Battle God's Radiance, Unstoppable Companion Form, Golden Trident. The Golden Trident stats were rather good. It was much better than the 6-winged Guardian Dragon before it was strengthened. However, what puzzled Zhou was why its Wheel of Fortune was called Mercy of the War God. Could it be that it's the same as 6-winged? It's not an offensive miracle? No way. This is a weapon-type companion beast. How can it not be an offense-type miracle? Zhou hurriedly read the introduction of Mercy of the War God. Mercy of the War God. Mercy on the battlefield is to end the enemy's life and reduce the enemy's pain. This is the mercy of a god. When Zhou saw this annotation, he immediately felt relieved. From the looks of it, this was undoubtedly an offense-type miracle. The Golden Trident only had 2 skills, so it definitely lacked many skills. However, these 2 skills were very useful. Battle God's Radiance was the skill that had instantly killed Zhou. The Golden Trident glowed brightly and attacked indiscriminately within a certain range. It was a large-scale area of effect essence energy skill. It was somewhat similar to Banana Fairy's Grand Wind. It consumed a lot of essence energy. Unstoppable was a passive essence energy skill similar to Ever Victorious, but its effects were stronger. This was exactly what Zhou needed. Zhou needed to test the Life Providence and Life Soul before he knew the exact effect. He switched back to the Slaughterer Life Soul and used his infinite essence energy to incubate the Golden Battle God Halberd. When the Golden Trident appeared in Zhou's hand, he knew that his chance to kill Torch Dragon had finally arrived. He could use the Golden Trident to grind Medusa and test its might. After entering the Medusa Temple, the 6-winged Guardian Dragon restrained Medusa. The tip of the Golden Trident stabbed into Medusa's heart from behind with a golden divine glow. With just one strike, it pierced through Medusa's heart, killing this terrifying existence that had once nearly taken Zhou's life. Zhou understood that the golden light at the tip of the Golden Trident was likely its life soul, golden divine glow. However, Zhou didn't see any effects of its Wheel of Destiny. Could it be that Medusa is too weak and doesn't need to use the benevolence of the battle god? With this in mind, Zhou got the Golden Trident to use its miracle to kill some monsters. However, Zhou only saw it pierce through the monsters' bodies and kill them. He didn't see it use any ultimate moves. How strange. What kind of miracle is the benevolence of the battle god? Why doesn't it seem to have any effects? Zhou still remembered how gorgeous and dazzling Holy Angel's redemption was when Hardadef used the miracle. The Golden Trident was too lacking. Despite his thoughts, Zhou was still very satisfied. The Golden Trident satisfied his greatest need. It was an excellent weapon that should be able to pierce through Torch Dragon's body. Unfortunately, Medusa didn't drop a companion egg. All it dropped was a speed crystal. It was useless to Zhou since he couldn't bring it out. After familiarizing himself with the Golden Battle God Halberd's abilities and characteristics, Zhou couldn't wait to take it and 6-winged to the Zhuolu Ruins Temple. With the Golden Battle God Halberd and 6-winged around, the Aoyin stone statue guarding the door was nothing. It was instantly killed by the Golden Battle God Halberd. Its devouring ability was useless against the Golden Battle God Halberd. Soon, Zhou entered the temple. Chapter 553. Without Truth Listener, Zhou was a little passive. However, with the augmentation of 6-wings flight speed and the transcendent flying immortal movement technique, Zhou still found an opportunity. The Golden Battle God Halberd stabbed into Torch Dragon's scales with a divine glow. Even though it was such a sharp divine weapon, Zhou Wen still felt immense resistance when it tore through the scales. It was like a blunt knife cutting through flesh. Although he could stab in, it didn't feel smooth. Torch Dragon was injured as it let out a sharp cry. The scales on its body stood up diagonally as it raised its head and tilted it back. Seeing that the golden battle god halberd couldn't stab it to death, Zhou Wen wanted to take the opportunity to deliver another strike. However, in the next second, Zhou Wen suddenly saw two lantern-like eyes appear on both sides of Torch Dragon's body. Then, there was nothing. The blood-colored avatar was sucked into the bright torch god world by the eyes and the game screen instantly went black. Zhou Wen held his phone and didn't even have the mood to re-enter the game. Torch Dragon's entire body was filled with eyes. Unless Zhou Wen's entire body was covered in mirrors, it was impossible for him to dodge the bright torch vision world. Although Torch Dragon had only used this move at the last moment, so it was very likely that there were great restrictions. No matter how many restrictions there were, as long as it could be used once, Zhou Wen would be doomed. There was no chance of him surviving. Suddenly, an idea flashed through Zhou Wen's mind. It's impossible for my entire body to be covered in mirrors. Then, can I turn my armor into a mirror? Zhou Wen thought of this possibility. It was impossible for the crystal mirror formed by the Sun Beast to cover his entire body, but if he fused the crystal mirror with another armor-type companion beast, would it become a mirror-like reflective armor? Although the possibility was very small, he had to give it a try. Otherwise, he could only find a larger mirror to completely block his body. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to dodge Torch Dragon's final bright torch vision world. However, Zhou Wen only had one Sun Beast. Its drop rate was pitifully low. After grinding for so long, Zhou Wen only had one drop. Zhou Wen studied it for a while. The Sun Beast and the armor-type companion beasts he had didn't have high compatibility. They didn't even have 40, so the success rate was definitely low. Even if it succeeded, it might not turn into a mirror armor like Zhou Wen had imagined. Who knew what would happen after the two companion beasts fused? Zhou Wen thought for a moment and planned on asking around if there was a companion beast armor with a mirror surface. If there was, it wouldn't be so troublesome. Zhou Wen sent a message to Li Xian, but Li Xian didn't know where to find such armor. He asked Xing again. And Xing thought for a while, but he similarly couldn't think of any such armor. According to him, the armor closest to the one Zhou Wen mentioned was likely the armor transformed from an ice nightmare. However, according to what he knew, ice nightmares were mythical companion beasts. There was only one in the North District, and it was in Lance's family. However, the armor that the ice nightmare had transformed into couldn't be said to be completely mirror-like. It was like a smooth ice surface that could reflect a certain amount of light and shadow, but it wasn't as clear as a real mirror. Indeed, it still doesn't work? Zhou Wen was somewhat disappointed. Young Master One, I'll be heading out soon. If you need anything, you can call this number. And Xing sent a number to Zhou Wen. Where are you going? Zhou Wen asked. Didn't I obtain that mythical companion egg previously? However, because I don't have enough primordial energy, rashly incubating a mythical companion egg will put my life in danger. Therefore, I can only use some special means. I plan on going to a dimensional zone with relatively abundant primordial energy, and then use some special methods to successfully incubate the mythical companion egg. If I'm fast, I'll be back in a month. If I'm slow, it'll probably take 2 to 3 months, and Xing said. Zhou Wen thought for a moment and said, Xing, I want to go to Zhuolu in the near future. When? And Xing didn't ask any additional questions. He knew that Zhou Wen definitely had to give it a try after having the 6-winged guardian angel. I haven't decided on the time yet. I still need to prepare some things. I'll contact you when I'm ready. It'll probably take some time. Zhou Wen wasn't sure when he could resolve the problem of the mirror armor. However, even without the mirror armor, Zhou Wen had to make a trip as soon as possible. He couldn't wait any longer. No matter how optimistic he was, the former principal probably had no hope of survival. Now, Zhou only wanted to enter to take a look. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to calm his heart. If he really couldn't obtain the mirror armor, Zhou planned on bringing in some huge mirrors made of tempered glass. He would place the mirrors in the chaos space and use them to block Torch Dragon's bright torch vision world. This move could only be used in reality. Furthermore, it hadn't been tested. He didn't know if an ordinary mirror could block bright torch vision world. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Zhou didn't want to take this step. Alright, I'll hatch the mythical pet as soon as possible and rush back. Ansheng went offline after replying. Zhou knew that Ansheng's trip was definitely very dangerous. It wasn't difficult for Zhou to hatch a companion beast that was at a higher level, but to ordinary people, it was a matter of life and death. Zhou could only pray for Ansheng's safe return. It was impossible to stop him from incubating the mythical pet. After entering the temple again, Zhou stabbed Torch Dragon with the golden trident again. Just like the last time, countless eyes appeared on Torch Dragon's body as it used bright torch vision world. At that instant, Zhou switched to Lost Country and used teleportation to change his position. He wanted to see if he could dodge bright torch vision world, but it was futile. After he teleported out, he was killed by bright torch vision world. From the looks of it, apart from finding a sufficiently large mirror, the only way is to fuse with it. Zhou really couldn't think of any other solution. However, there was only one sun beast. Zhou didn't immediately fuse with it. Instead, he continued grinding Music Temple to see if he could get another sun beast. At the same time, Zhou began studying the First Order of Chaos. He wanted to see if he could condense a life providence with the First Order of Chaos. If the First Order of Chaos could condense a life providence, he might be able to hatch the Invisibility Cloak companion egg again. With the Invisibility Cloak, he might be able to crack bright torch vision world. The First Order of Chaos was somewhat similar to another primordial energy art that Zhou had cultivated. It was the Tao Sutra. Zhou verified each other and quickly comprehended the First Order of Chaos. However, there were still some differences between the two. Zhou studied it for 2 to 3 days and comprehended many mysteries. He vaguely felt that the First Order of Chaos had some strange changes, as though it was about to condense a life providence. However, in the past 2 to 3 days, Zhou had grinded Medusa and the Golden Trident a few times, but nothing good dropped. Medusa had dropped a skill crystal that Zhou couldn't absorb. Is the 1/3 drop rate that Ansheng mentioned true? Zhou was extremely puzzled. Chapter 554. Ansheng was right about 1/3, but that was the drop rate of killing different mythical creatures. They had never killed the same mythical creature consecutively. In reality, after a mythical creature was killed, it would take a long time for a mythical creature of the same type to come from the dimensional rift. This would take at least a year and a half, and at most a few years or decade. There weren't many opportunities to kill the same mythical creature. Some families were luckier. They spent a lot of time studying a mythical creature. After killing it, it was already very impressive for a mythical creature of the same type to appear every year for a few years. After killing so many mythical creatures, the chances of a companion egg dropping were very low. Only under extremely lucky circumstances would a second companion egg of the same type be produced. This was something only a family with a rich heritage could do. Now, the An family had only been in business for a few years. Up to now, they had only seen a few mythical creatures of the same type. In fact, they hadn't killed many mythical creatures, so how could they have such experience? If time dragged on, in a few years or more, the An family might also have a mythical companion egg of the same type, but the drop rate would probably be less than 1/3. This also involved the problem of uniqueness. For example, a mythical pet like the 6-winged guardian dragon might have a companion beast of the same type, but for Banana Fairy and Truth Listener, they were unique. There wouldn't be a second banana fairy or truth listener that looked exactly the same. Zhou still didn't know if the golden battle god Halberd and Medusa were unique mythical companion beasts. He could only confirm it after grinding for a long time. At that moment, Zhou didn't care much about this problem. He was still studying the first order of chaos. Legend had it that this was the essence energy art of chaos in Greek mythology. Chaos was probably equivalent to the egg that was split open by Pangu in the East District's mythology. It represented the chaos world where yin and yang had yet to be separated, and the Tao Sutra also studied the Tao of nature. Although there were still some differences between the two, it wasn't difficult to understand the profundities of the first order of chaos with a little reference. In just 2 days, Zhou had a breakthrough. All his essence energy constantly circulated in his body, gradually transforming into a strange power that fused with his body and mind. This power couldn't be seen, but he could sense it. It was the life providence that Zhou had condensed many times. After successfully condensing a life providence, Zhou opened his stats and took a look. Indeed, he had an additional life providence after switching to the first order of chaos. Life providence. Chaos body. Zhou gave it a try and realized that the chaos body was very similar to his Tao body. It also had an extremely powerful recovery effect on essence energy and strengthened his body to a certain extent. It was similar to a Tao body. Zhou attempted to use his chaos body to inject his essence energy into the invisibility cloak. The invisibility cloak trembled even more as though it was about to break out of its shell. But after shaking for a long time, it still didn't come out. After all day, Zhou still failed to produce the invisibility cloak. He knew that he was still lacking something. He probably had to wait for the first order of chaos to condense a life soul before he could hatch it. I'm afraid it won't be easy to condense a life soul. These primordial energy arts were simulated by the Lost Immortal Sutra, not something I really mastered. Previously, those life souls absorbed a special attribute to successfully condense a life soul. If I want to condense a life soul for the first order of chaos, I'm afraid I'll have to do the same, right? Zhou thought to himself. Previously, the Tao body absorbed the taboo attribute to condense a life soul. As for the taboo attribute, it was because I absorbed the blood of the creature in the white cocoon in the ant nest. Can I help the first order of chaos condense a life soul with another drop of blood? As the first order of chaos was similar to the Tao Sutra, Zhou felt that it should be easier for the first order of chaos to condense a life soul than the small perfection of wisdom. After all, he had a similar experience. Now all he lacked was a drop of blood. This was because Zhou didn't have the physique needed to cultivate the first order of chaos. It was purely simulated by the Lost Immortal Sutra. To condense a life soul, he needed a foundation. After figuring this out, Zhou opened the ant nest dungeon and made a trip to Ant City. It had been days since he came to Ant Nest. Coming here again suddenly felt like it was yesterday. It was as though the time when he obtained the mysterious phone and came here to grind ants was yesterday. However, the ants here were no longer able to cause him any harm. Any companion beast beside Zhou could finish them off. The Fire Furnace Queen threw a ball of fire furnace down, burning a large number of ants to death. The notification of killing a dimensional creature flooded the screen. To Zhou, the golden flying ant could be easily killed. Six-Winged killed it with a single swipe of its claw as though it was slapping an ant. Apart from this white cocoon, I've seen 2 others. One is protected by a white dragon, and the other is protected by the chick's mother. They are extremely terrifying mythical creatures. In comparison, the golden flying ant's guardian isn't very qualified. Seeing that the golden flying ant didn't drop anything, Zhou flew towards the white cocoon. He summoned the golden battle god Halberd and held it with both hands. The 6-winged guardian dragon stood in front of him, protecting him. The last time Zhou came, he was instantly killed by the creature inside the white cocoon. Although his strength had improved greatly and he had 2 authentic mythical companion beasts, he still felt that he was probably no match for the creature inside the cocoon. Attack! Zhou gripped the trident tightly as he stared intently at the white cocoon. When the 6-winged guardian dragon heard the order, its 6 dragon wings transformed into streams of light that slashed at the white cocoon like 6 dancing blades. The 6-winged guardian dragon was still very powerful. Its dragon wings sliced open the white cocoon, revealing the curled creature inside. Without any hesitation, Zhou stabbed the golden trident at the creature the moment the white cocoon was torn open. He used all his strength, and it could be said that this stab was the fastest strike he had ever delivered in his life. Although Zhou felt that he might not be a match for the creature inside the cocoon, it shouldn't be difficult for him to obtain a drop of blood. After all, he had succeeded in the past when he was weaker than he was now. Furthermore, he had used the golden trident to kill Medusa from behind with Lost Country's teleportation. This had already proven the powerful destructive power of the golden trident. Zhou thought that if the creature inside the cocoon didn't defend in time, he might be able to take advantage of the situation and kill her. I wonder what will drop if she dies? A thought flashed through Zhou's mind. It only took an instant for this thought to flash through his mind. Just as the golden divine light at the tip of the golden trident was about to pierce the creature inside the cocoon, she didn't even raise her head to look at the blood-colored avatar. Zhou's heart raced. Just as he thought that he was about to succeed, the golden trident suddenly stopped. It only took an instant for it to go from extreme motion to extreme stillness. A snow-white hand grabbed the golden trident's blade. The extremely sharp blade was unable to cut through that seemingly fair and slender jade finger. The creature inside the cocoon finally raised its head. It turned its face and looked at the blood-colored avatar with a demonic eye. Chapter 555. Zhou's heart skipped a beat as he felt that something was amiss. He subconsciously switched to the Defy Ancient Sovereign and used the Demon Dragon True Body. The 6-winged guardian dragon roared and spewed out dragon breath. Bam! The blood-colored avatar and 6-winged felt as though they had been struck by lightning. The blood-colored avatar uncontrollably released the golden battle god halberd as its body flew backward. Like a cannonball, it slammed into the mountain wall, leaving 2 holes in it. Zhou felt that the blood-colored avatar was severely injured, but thankfully it wasn't dead. This time, it wasn't instantly killed by the creature inside the cocoon. Just as he was about to leave the hole, he saw a golden light flash in front of him. The golden battle god halberd flew over and nailed the blood-colored avatar's body, piercing through its chest. The game screen instantly went black. This fellow is a little too strong. The 6-winged seraphim should be much weaker than her, right? Zhou was somewhat depressed. He only wanted a drop of blood, but he was still killed. However, Zhou realized something. This time, she was clearly different from before. Her body seemed to have grown a lot. The first time he came, the creature inside the cocoon was still asleep. It was only when he injured her that she woke up. This time, it was clear that she had completely awakened. Her body had also developed more perfectly. Every time he saw her, she was a little different. This was clearly different from the other dimensional creatures in the game. According to the Dharch, the creatures inside the cocoon should be the guardians of the various races. Then, can I drip my blood on the cocoon like John? If I can obtain her approval, will she become my guardian? From the looks of it, she's clearly much stronger than the 6-winged seraphim. This thought flashed through Zhou's mind. However, it was only for an instant. He had so many secrets, so he definitely couldn't let an intelligent creature that could betray him stay by his side 24 hours a day. Since I can't do it head-on, I can only sneak and attack. Zhou re-entered Ant City, but this time, he had learned his lesson and didn't directly face the creature inside the cocoon. He first used the 6-winged guardian dragon as bait. The blood-colored avatar and demonic neonate hid in the ant honey pool and secretly waited for an opportunity. The six-winged guardian dragon blasted open the white cocoon. The creature inside the cocoon only glanced at it before it was sent flying. From a third party's point of view, it was even more shocking. The powerful six-winged guardian dragon was already considered a top mythical creature. Its huge body was actually sent flying by her gaze. Zhou and demonic neonate weren't idle. The blood-colored avatar held the golden battle god halberd and teleported behind the creature inside the cocoon. The tip of the golden battle god halberd was almost touching her back. As long as Zhou pushed it forward a little more, the golden divine light would be able to pierce her skin and produce a drop of blood. As long as Zhou moved, the golden divine light would be able to pierce through her skin and produce a drop of blood. Bang! Zhouwen's body flew out like a cannonball, and soon, the game screen turned black. Is a divine Wen's dragon's mythical creature. Apart from the Dharch whose strength is unknown, she's countless times stronger than any mythical creature I've ever seen. Zhou felt that this fellow might not be as simple as the mythical stage. Dragon was already a top mythical creature. A dragon. King, a king, a king dragon it. King. A king. Zhou suspected that a guardian could break through the limits of the mythical stage. If not, her skills, life soul, and other aspects were already heaven-defying. After dying twice in a row, Zhou didn't return to Ant City. The Dharch, how can I contract the guardian you mentioned last time? Zhou sent a probing message to the Dharch. However, the Dharch didn't reply. It was unknown what she was doing. He hadn't seen her appear recently. Zhou didn't go to Ant City again. He had to think of a foolproof method before attempting it. It was useless to blindly try. I wonder if the crystal mirror formed by the sun beast can reflect her gaze, Zhou thought as he grinded. Ding! Suddenly, a strange sound entered Zhouwen's ears. He turned his head and saw a companion egg drop beside the six-winged guardian dragon. It was a sun beast companion egg. Zhou was delighted as he hurriedly went over to pick up the companion egg. After it hatched, he had another sun beast companion beast with similar stat. Unfortunately, the crystal mirror was too small. Even with two crystal mirrors, it was difficult to completely hide Zhouwen's body. There are two crystal mirrors. I can try synthesizing them. Zhou decided to try synthesizing them. If he could create a full body armor with a mirror surface, his entire body would be equivalent to a mirror. Torch Dragon's bright torch vision world would naturally be useless against him. However, the crystal mirror's compatibility with the armor was too low. With a compatibility of more than 40, it was easy for the synthesis to fail. Typical armor is made of metal, while crystal mirrors are made of crystals. Could this be because the compatibility is relatively low? Zhou thought for a moment and went to the Cursed Demon Palace to grind a companion beast in the form of a stone armor. Putting them together, he found that the compatibility was indeed much higher, reaching 61. As expected. However, this stone armor's skills and life providence aren't good. Most importantly, this isn't a full body armor. There's no way to protect my entire body. Zhou checked online and realized that there were quite a number of jade-like full-body armor companion beasts. After checking a lot of information, Zhou decided to buy a companion beast like a jade armor to synthesize it. He still had a large number of essence crystals on him, so it wasn't difficult to buy an epic companion egg. Zhou decided to head to a companion egg shop to take a look. This was because the companion eggs available online might not be sold at the local companion egg shop. However, Zhou didn't go to Qin Shiyuan's shop. He had a nagging feeling that there was something wrong with Qin Shiyuan. If he could avoid it, he didn't wish to have too much contact with him. Zhou remembered that his classmate, Luo Xian's family, also owned a companion beast shop. Therefore, he contacted Luo Xian and asked him about jade-like armor. Luo Xian said that his shop should have it, but he needed to visit the shop to know the exact details. He told Zhou Wen to head to his shop to take a look. When Zhou Wen arrived at Luo Xian's pet shop, Luo Xian rushed back. Jade-armored companion beasts are considered one of the more common type. Compared to metal and wooden armor, jade armor is relatively cheaper, but it's not that much cheaper. After all, you want an epic companion egg. Luo Xian personally brought Zhou Wen to see the jade-type companion beasts in their shop. Is there any jade armor that can wrap your entire body tightly? It's best if there's no gap at all? Zhou Wen asked as he looked. That's really not easy to find. Jade armor is heavy to begin with. If it's full body armor, it'll be even more inconvenient. Luo Xian thought for a moment and said, however, we do have such an epic companion egg in our shop. However, the price might be higher than the typical epic. Chapter 556. When Zhou Wen left the shop, there was an additional crystalline jade-like companion egg in his bag. This companion egg was an epic jade figurine that had dropped from an ancient tomb dimensional zone. There were more pottery and bronze figurines there, and jade figurines were relatively rare. Such figurines were armor-type companion forms. As jade figurines were relatively rare, they were much more expensive. Zhou Wen had used his phone to look at the jade figurine companion egg stat. It was rather good and could be considered a top-grade epic. Guardian Jade Figurine. Epic Life Providence. Unaging and Undying Life Soul. Guardian Spirit Strength. 39 Speed. 28 Constitution. 40 Essence Energy. 40 Talent Skill. Bright Jade Shield Companion Form. Armor. Apart from speed, the Guardian Jade figurine was an excellent grade item at the epic stage. However, Zhou Wen only wanted its companion form. The speed attribute didn't matter. He had used his phone to match it with the Sun Beast. The compatibility between the Guardian Jade figurine and the Sun Beast reached 91%, much higher than the stone armor from before. After returning to his dorm, Zhou Wen eagerly hatched the Guardian Jade figurine and placed it into the fusion column with the Sun Beast. I hope there will be a good outcome. Zhou Wen had spent all his money to buy the Guardian Jade figurine. Although he had a lot of essence crystals on him, he couldn't exchange them for money, so he naturally couldn't use them to pay the bill. Zhou Wen had no idea if the armor and mirror could fuse together into a mirror armor as perfectly as he imagined. However, he had no choice but to give it a try. Seeing the two pets emit a resplendent glow as they gradually fused into one, Zhou Wen's heart leaped to his throat. The fusion succeeded very easily, but success wasn't the main point. It was difficult to fail with a compatibility of 91%. Whether it could transform into what Zhou Wen needed was the main point. After waiting for a while, Zhou Wen felt that something was amiss. Why didn't the light dissipate? On careful look, he realized that the fusion had been successful. However, the new pet emitted a resplendent glow like the sun, preventing Zhou Wen from seeing it clearly. On careful look, he realized that the new pet's body had become like a crystal. It emitted a resplendent glow and maintained the appearance of a jade figurine. Please let it be armor. Armor. Delighted, he hurriedly looked at the new pet's information. Jade Crystal Spirit. Epic Life Providence. Ageless Life Soul. Guardian Spirit Strength. 40 Speed. 31 Constitution. 40 Essence Energy. 40 Innate Skill. Jade Crystal Barrier. Companion Form. Armor. Zhou Wen was overjoyed as he hurriedly summoned the Jade Crystal Spirit in its companion form. Soon, a crystal armor appeared on Zhou Wen's body and enveloped him. Zhou Wen looked in the mirror and nearly jumped up in excitement. The armor on his body was like a crystal mirror, clearly reflecting everything around him. At a glance, it looked as though Zhou Wen's body had vanished. Zhou Wen felt as though he had eaten a fruit of life, as all his pores exuded a comfortable feeling. He had never had a pet fusion go so smoothly before. To Zhou Wen, this was a miracle. He eagerly entered the game and wore the jade crystal spirit armor to head to the temple. He wanted to see if such armor could block the bright torch vision world. Just like before, Zhou flew behind Torch Dragon and stabbed the golden battle god halberd into its back. Under Torch Dragon's pain, rows of eyes appeared on both sides of its body. Each eye had the ability of the bright torch vision world. Almost instantly, the dragon wings on Zhou Wen's back and the golden battle god halberd in his hand vanished, reflected in Torch Dragon's eyes. As for the blood-colored avatar wearing the jade crystal spirit armor, it was fine. It's indeed useful. Zhou felt relieved. He knew that he could finally kill Torch Dragon. Torch Dragon's berserk state indeed couldn't last long. In just a minute, other than the pair of snake eyes, the other eyes closed. However, this minute felt as long as a century to Zhou. Without the augmentation of the dragon wings, it was extremely difficult for Zhou to dodge with just his transcendent flying immortal. He was nearly killed by the dragon a few times. Thankfully, he had Slaughterer's infinite essence energy to support him. Zhou maintained his transcendent flying immortal state and used ghost steps at the same time. Under high pressure, he fused the two essence energy skills and constantly passed through the pillars of the palace. Finally, he managed to survive until Torch Dragon's eyes closed. After the eyes on Torch Dragon's body closed, its aura weakened greatly. It felt like it was about to collapse. However, without the golden battle god halberd, Zhou couldn't kill it. In the end, he was killed by Torch Dragon. Zhou didn't feel depressed about death at all. His heart was calm as he knew that he could finally head to the ruins to kill Torch Dragon. He dripped his blood to revive again and entered the game dungeon. Now, Zhou was especially calm because he knew that Torch Dragon was no longer an obstacle. He arrived in front of Torch Dragon again. The moment the golden battle god halberd stabbed Torch Dragon, Zhou retracted the golden battle god halberd and the dragon wings and quickly retreated. Indeed, Torch Dragon's eyes opened wide like last time. Zhou constantly used his movement technique to circle around the metal pillars. Torch Dragon, which was covered in eyes and resembled a lantern, chased after him with all its might. Minutes and seconds passed. After struggling for a minute, all the eyes on Torch Dragon's body closed. Its body seemed to wither as its massive body seemed to shrink. Now, it's my turn. Zhou summoned the dragon wings and golden battle god halberd again as his eyes burned with passion. After working hard for so long, he had finally crossed this mountain that seemed impossible to cross in the past. As though sensing the change in Zhou's aura, Torch Dragon shrank back in fear. It's too late for you to be afraid now. The dragon wings on Zhou's back flapped as he instantly appeared beside Torch Dragon. The golden divine light at the tip of the golden battle god halberd tore through the poisonous fog around it and stabbed at Torch Dragon's body. Blood splattered as the golden divine light tore through Torch Dragon's scales and flesh. Amidst its shrill cry, Torch Dragon spewed out poisonous smoke as the scales on its body shot out black light. However, it was already at the end of its tether. Its might was much stronger than before, making it unable to injure Zhou. Zhou's figure flashed as the golden battle god halberd constantly tore through Torch Dragon's flesh. Dragon blood splattered everywhere in the palace. The powerful Torch Dragon finally collapsed at Zhou's feet. When the huge body collapsed, the entire palace seemed to tremble. Zhou felt indescribable joy as he looked at Torch Dragon's corpse in a pool of blood. Ding! As Torch Dragon's corpse slowly disappeared, a black crystal dropped. Chapter 557. Killed mythical creature, Torch Dragon youngling. Discovered dimensional crystal. This thing. It's even a youngling. Zhou couldn't help but be alarmed. If it were an adult Torch Dragon, he wondered how strong it would be. Only one dimensional crystal dropped. When Zhou saw the number, he imagined that it was an ordinary dimensional crystal and couldn't help but be disappointed. However, on careful look, it was a dimensional crystal with plus 37 spatial stat. A rare spatial stat. It's 37 points. Zhou was overjoyed as he hurriedly took the spatial crystal to absorb. Wisps of strange power fused into Zhou body, making him feel as though his body had changed, but he couldn't tell what had changed. After the spatial crystal was completely absorbed, Zhou realized that his spatial stat had reached 37 points among his rare stat. Spatial stat, 37 points. The Jade Pipa crystal's requirement is 41 constitution, 21 spatial, and a spatial life providence and life soul. In that case, as long as I raise my constitution to 41 points, I can absorb and comprehend the Jade Pipa's skills. Zhou was still thinking about the Jade Pipa crystal. Although no companion egg dropped, its special stats were still extremely valuable. Zhou was satisfied and planned on doing it again. Unfortunately, Torch Dragon Youngling was the same as the Golden Battle God Halberd. It didn't immediately appear after the dungeon respawned. It would probably take 24 hours for Torch Dragon Youngling to appear again. It's time to head to Zhuelu. Zhou planned on heading to Zhuelu while waiting for the dungeon to respawn. As long as he grinded 2 more times and confirmed that he could safely kill Torch Dragon, he would immediately enter the ruins. The chick and antelope didn't need to care about them. If the two of them didn't see Zhou return, they would definitely run to Wang Lu's place to scrounge for food and drinks. They wouldn't starve themselves. Zhou planned on buying some things before heading to Zhuelu. Just as he walked out of Four Seasons Garden, he happened to meet Ming Xiu and Tianjinjin, who had come to find him. "Coach, our exchange is almost over. I came to say hi to you before I left," Ming Xiu said. "That fast?" Zhou was somewhat surprised. He felt that Ming Xiu hadn't been here for long, but he didn't expect it to be 3 months. Indeed, gaming days passed faster. The day after tomorrow happens to be the 3-month period. "I was afraid that the school would have some arrangements and I wouldn't be able to bid you farewell, so I came early," Ming Xiu said. Zhou didn't know what to say. He wasn't good at saying such polite words, much less parting words. "Coach, if you have time, can we have another match before I leave?" Ming Xiu clearly wasn't the kind of person who would invite others to a farewell meal. He didn't come to Zhou just to bid him farewell. "Now," Zhou said with a nod. "Then let's go to the training grounds. I've improved a lot recently. Although I haven't advanced to the epic stage, I've gained some insights," Ming Xiu said excitedly. The 3 of them came to the training grounds and used an empty room. Tianjinjin stood by the side to watch the battle. Zhou and Ming Xiu took their weapons for practice and stood in the middle of the field. "Coach, please advise me." With the sword in his hand, Ming Xiu's temperament immediately changed. The gentleness from before disappeared, and his person was even more chilling than the sword in his hand. Zhou held the practice sword in his hand and assumed the stance of transcendent flying immortal. Ming Xiu had specially come to spar with him before he left, so Zhou didn't want to brush him off. Ming Xiu held the sword, and at the instant his aura reached its peak, he unsheathed the sword and transformed into a stream of light that stabbed at Zhou. Like the last ray of light on the horizon before the sun set, Ming Xiu's strike was gorgeous and decisive. It was the final afterglow and also the final bloom. Both focused on speed, but Ming Xiu's sword technique and Feng Chuyan's saber technique gave off a completely different feeling. Tianjinjin watched Ming Xiu's strike from the side, her eyes filled with anticipation. She hoped that the strike would surprise Zhou. She had been practicing with Ming Xiu all this time, so she knew how much hardship Ming Xiu had suffered in order to practice his swordsmanship. She also knew how fast Ming Xiu had improved. Although she knew that it was impossible for Ming Xiu to defeat Zhou, she also hoped to see a surprised expression on Zhou's face. That was the greatest reward for Ming Xiu's hard work. Tianjinjin knew very well that Zhou's surprised expression was more important to Ming Xiu than the thousands of praises from others. However, Zhou didn't show any expression on his face. The practice sword in his hand moved slightly and blocked Ming Xiu's sword. Although Ming Xiu's sword was fast and ruthless, it was still too slow for Zhou. Ming Xiu couldn't help but feel discouraged when he saw that Zhou had easily blocked his strike that he had poured everything into. He stood there with his sword in hand. "What are you waiting for? Continue," Zhou said when he saw that Ming Xiu wasn't attacking. Ming Xiu's eyes focused as he gripped the sword in his hand tightly and swung it again. This strike was also as fast as lightning. However, Zhou still casually brandished his sword and blocked Ming Xiu's sword again. However, this time, Ming Xiu didn't hesitate or pause as he attacked again. Tianjinjin was filled with disappointment. Ming Xiu had clearly worked so hard, but Zhou was still able to casually block his sword technique. Ming Xiu circled around Zhou and constantly attacked. His sword techniques were like meteors streaking across the sky, but Zhou didn't use his strongest strike. He didn't even move from his spot. All he did was casually wave his sword and block Ming Xiu's sword that came from all directions. Tianjinjin couldn't help but smile bitterly. She knew that the difference between the two of them was too great, so great that it left her in despair. Seeing Ming Xiu constantly attack Zhou but fail to make him move a single step, Tianjinjin felt her heart shatter. She really didn't wish to see Ming Xiu suffer such a blow. Seeing Ming Xiu fail time and time again, seeing the sword technique that Ming Xiu had painstakingly trained and be completely destroyed in front of Zhou, she wanted to rush forward to stop Ming Xiu from continuing the battle. She didn't want Ming Xiu to suffer such humiliation again. "If I were you, I wouldn't disturb him," a voice sounded from the side. As Tianjinjin was too engrossed, she didn't notice that someone was standing beside her. "President Wei?" Tianjinjin turned her head and realized that it was the student council president, Wei Gu. Wei Gu watched the battle between Zhou and Ming Xiu and said, "No one is born a winner. Every man will experience countless failures in his life. However, some men will fall in failure and never get up again. Some men will get up from failure and continue advancing, eventually becoming geniuses in the eyes of others. Believe in him. Don't stand in front of him. Don't block his path. Just trust him." Tianjinjin didn't quite understand, but she dispelled the urge to rush over. Ming Xiu's sword kept swinging out, but it was also constantly blocked by Zhou. Wei Ji's eyes narrowed slightly. He could tell that Ming Xiu's sword technique was transforming. He was searching for all possibilities. As long as he could get up and continue advancing, he hadn't lost. Chapter 558. Zhou Wen's sword technique looked ordinary, but in fact, he had already used the technique of transcendent flying immortal. However, he didn't take the initiative to attack and used it completely to defend. As someone who had been around for a long time, they couldn't see through the profoundness of it. However, just defending gave Ming Xiu a lot of pressure. It was just like when Zhou fought Xia Xianyue, she had used the path to snatching heaven to pressure him. However, Zhou Wen's movement technique wasn't the path to snatching heaven, so it wasn't as aggressive. He was only defending, but it also made Ming Xiu feel like he would be killed by Zhou if he didn't attack. Therefore, Ming Xiu could only continue to attack and attack. If it was an ordinary person, under such pressure, they would probably lose their courage and their willpower would quickly collapse. They would either give up resisting or fight to the death without a care for anything else. However, Ming Xiu didn't give up. Under such pressure, he constantly searched for an opportunity to defeat Zhou as he constantly attacked with his sword. No. It still doesn't work. Ming Xiu kept trying, but no matter how fast his sword was, how gorgeous his technique was, or how ingenious his strikes were, they were perfectly blocked by Zhou. How can I break through Coach's defense? Ming Xiu had already tried his best. He had tried all the possible paths, but he couldn't think of a better solution. Ming Xiu knew that this couldn't continue. Once his train of thought was cut off, his sword's stance would weaken. When that happened, he would suffer Zhou Wen's counterattack. This was his final battle with Zhou Wen before he left. He didn't want to leave just like that. What should I do? What should I do? Instantly, countless thoughts flashed through Ming Xiu's mind. Ming Xiu suddenly felt that this situation was a little familiar. He seemed to have experienced such a situation before. Soon, Ming Xiu recalled why he found such a situation familiar. It was because he had faced the same predicament when he was young. Back then, he had just started practicing swordplay. He was young and had little strength. He was only 3 years old, but the other students who practiced with him were already 6 or 7 years old. Therefore, during sparring, Ming Xiu was always defeated by his classmates due to his lack of strength. Back then, he had just come into contact with swordplay, so how could he know anything about it? Basically, whoever had greater strength was stronger. He was a few years older than his classmates, so the difference in strength was almost greater than the heavens. With Ming Xiu's temper, he naturally wouldn't accept it. At that time, he often thought that if he could grow up faster and become as strong as his classmates, he would definitely not lose. Unfortunately, it was impossible for him to grow up overnight. But since then, Ming Xiu had been constantly practicing and honing his skills. Although he was still very young, after a few months, he could already fight against his classmates who were a few years older than him. A year later, there were no other children who were his match. The predicament he was in back then was the same as the predicament he was in now. Zhou Wen was much stronger than him in every aspect, but the difference was that even in terms of technique, he couldn't defeat Zhou Wen. When I was young, I couldn't realize that kind of fantasy. But now I might be able to realize it. I can realize it in another way. Ming Xiu seemed to have made up his mind, and the look in his eyes became sharper. His gaze is different, Wei Gu said with narrowed eyes. What's different about your gaze? Tian Jinjin asked in puzzlement. Watch his next strike. Perhaps this will be a very important moment in his life. Wei Gu didn't elaborate. Tian Jinjin had no choice but to stare at Ming Xiu, wanting to know what would be different about his next strike. Ming Xiu held his sword as a sword beam flashed like a meteor. From Tian Jinjin's point of view, this strike was no different from many of the previous strikes. They were all so fast and gorgeous, but such a strike couldn't defeat Zhou Wen. She had seen it countless times. Such a gorgeous sword technique had been easily blocked by Zhou Wen. There had never been an exception. Indeed, Zhou Wen's sword blocked Ming Xiu's sword again. However, at the instant the two swords clashed, everyone was shocked to discover that Zhou Wen's sword missed. It failed to block Ming Xiu's sword. As for Ming Xiu's sword, it was like a late student. After Zhou Wen's sword swept over, his sword stabbed at Zhou Wen's heart. Great! Zhou Wen made a mistake. Tian Jinjin jumped up in excitement. She believed that it was Zhou Wen's mistake. Clang! However, in the next second, Zhou Wen's sword hilt slumped down and struck the tip of Ming Xiu's sword. He knocked Ming Xiu's sword to the side and ultimately failed to stab him. That wasn't Zhou Wen's mistake, but the result of Ming Xiu's deliberate actions. Even Zhou Wen failed to see through the late strike and was nearly struck. How interesting! Wei Gu revealed a teasing expression. Ming Xiu had already stopped attacking and didn't continue fighting. He returned his sword to its scabbard. Zhou Wen's sword-wielding hand drooped down, allowing the tip of the sword to stick to the ground. Good sword technique. What's the name of that strike? Zhou Wen asked Ming Xiu. It doesn't have a name yet. Coach, if you don't mind, give it a name, Ming Xiu said. Zhou Wen didn't decline. After some thought, he said, since it's a late strike, let's call it tomorrow's sword technique. Tomorrow's sword. Tomorrow's sword technique. All right. I'll call it tomorrow's sword technique. Ming Xiu seemed to like the name very much and decided on it. Then let me see how far your tomorrow's sword technique can go. Zhou narrowed his eyes as he stared at the sword in Ming Xiu's hand. He could sense that Ming Xiu's confidence and inspiration were erupting because of that strike. He was at the peak of his active thoughts. "Coach, please appraise my tomorrow's sword technique." Ming Xiu gripped the hilt of the sword. His entire being seemed to have entered a mysterious realm, giving off a surreal feeling. Crack! The practice sword and scabbard in Ming Xiu's hand cracked. Cracks spread across the scabbard, and in the blink of an eye, the scabbard shattered. The hilt that Ming Xiu held also shattered. It wasn't strange for the practice sword to shatter. What was strange was that after the practice sword and scabbard shattered, he still held a sword in his hand. It was a transparent sword of light. A terrifying sword intent emitted from the transparent sword beam. Life soul? Is that a life soul? Tianjinjin couldn't believe her judgment as she tugged at Wei Gu and asked. Yes, that's a life soul. How enviable. How old is he? He has already comprehended a life soul, Wei Gu said. He was really envious. If he had met Zhou earlier and come to his senses earlier, he wouldn't have wasted so much time doing those boring things. Perhaps he could have achieved such astonishing achievements at such an age like Feng Chuyan and Ming Xiu. Chapter 559. When the sword intent reached its peak, the terrifying sword intent suddenly converged. In an instant it was completely converged. As for the transparent sword beam in Ming Xiu's hand, it stabbed out at that instant. This wasn't a late strike, but a strike from the future. Ming Xiu's sword was unbelievably fast, as though it had broken through his limits and transcended time and space as it stabbed at Zhou. This strike's eruption was too sudden and strange. It made Tianjinjin's eyes unable to keep up with the strike. She didn't even see how the strike was thrust out when she heard a clang. The practice sword in Zhou hand had already broken, and the transparent sword in Ming Xiu's hand had returned to its scabbard at some point in time. Tomorrow is another day. There are so many tomorrows. If you have the intention, why wait for tomorrow? Get drunk today and slay tomorrow's grudge with the sword. Good sword technique. Wei Gu praised. Tianjinjin only knew that Ming Xiu's strike was very strong, but she didn't know how strong it was. She had been staring at it, but she couldn't see it clearly. Thank you for your guidance, coach. I'll be leaving. Ming Xiu bowed seriously before turning to leave the training room. Ming Xiu, you've finally won. Furthermore, you've condensed a life soul. You're only 17 years old. It's great that you're at the epic stage at 17, Tianjinjin chased after him and said excitedly. No, I lost, Ming Xiu said with a shake of his head. How can that be? I saw you shatter Zhou sword. You definitely won. Tianjinjin said in astonishment. That's because coach used a practice sword, but I used a life soul sword. That's why he blocked my sword. However, the practice sword was too weak, so it broke. Even so, my strike failed to injure him, nor did I force him to strike. I'm indeed too inferior. However, I already have a direction to advance Indiana. One day, I will catch up to coach, Ming Xiu said confidently. I see. However, you're already very impressive. You're at the epic stage at 17 years old. If your father knew, he would definitely be overjoyed, Tianjinjin consoled him. That's right. It's time to return and make him happy. I have to let others see if the sword technique my father passed down is weak or strong. Ming Xiu's eyes were also filled with excitement. After all, he was only a 17-year-old boy, and he was still hot-blooded. After Ming Xiu and Tianjinjin left, Zhou was about to leave when Wei Gu stopped him. Zhou, can we have a chat? Wei Gu asked. Guild leader, is something the matter? Zhou didn't have any special feelings towards Wei Gu. He didn't have any ill feelings or good feelings towards him. He was just a classmate he wasn't familiar with. I have a question for you, Wei Gu said. Just say it directly, but I might not be able to answer you, Zhou said. Wei Gu smiled and said, actually, it's not a big deal. I just wanted to ask you, do you plan on staying in school after graduation, or do you plan on going out? Everyone's choice is different. If it were me, I would only want to return to my hometown to game, Zhou Wen said. When Wei Guo heard Zhou Wen's answer, he fell into a daze for a while before he suddenly laughed. Not bad, not bad. Everyone's choice is different. I was overthinking things. Zhou Wen, what game are you playing? I should have a lot of free time in the future. I want to play it, Wei Guo asked. Recently, Huang Ji and I have developed a new game together. If you are interested, you can download it to play. This is the download address. Zhou Wen sent the download address of Dimension to Wei Guo. Alright, I'll go back and play. Wei Guo downloaded the game and waved goodbye to Zhou Wen. Zhou Wen went to the supermarket to buy some things and stored them in the chaos space. Then, he informed Li Xian and company before leaving school and heading to Zhuolu alone. He didn't contact Ansheng. If he did, Ansheng was still incubating the companion egg. Secondly, if he contacted Ansheng, he would definitely enter the temple with him. That would be a meaningless risk. Zhou Wen already had the confidence to kill Torch Dragon, so it was better to go alone. Before he left the city, his phone suddenly rang. When he looked at the number, he realized that it was Ouyang Lan. He couldn't help but mutter inwardly, "Don't tell me Ouyang Lan found out so quickly?" After picking up the call, Ouyang Lan asked out of the blue, "Little one, how's your interaction with your classmate?" "How's what?" Zhou Wen didn't understand what Ouyang Lan meant as he asked in puzzlement. "He's an exchange student from Bright Prospects College. Aren't you his tutor? How are you getting along? Are you on good terms?" Ouyang Lan asked. Zhou Wen was even more puzzled. Ouyang Lan was actually concerned about this. Unbeknownst to him, Zhou Wen had become Mingxiu's tutor because of Ouyang Lan. Relationship? Not bad. Zhou Wen felt that their relationship was pretty good. At the very least, they hadn't quarreled. That's good. What do you think if you and Mingxiu live together in the future? Ouyang Lan asked again. Wait, Sis Lan, what do you mean? What do you mean by letting me live with Mingxiu? Zhou Wen felt that something was amiss. Ouyang Lan said, "Do you know what Mingxiu's life providence is?" "I don't know." Zhou Wen had never cared about this. "Didn't you say that you have a good relationship? Why don't you even know his life providence?" Without waiting for Zhou Wen's answer, Ouyang Lan continued. "His life providence is peerless twins. Do you know what it means? It means that in the same era there are two peerless geniuses." And then? Zhou Wen still didn't understand what this had to do with him. "Little one, I think that while you are cultivating, you should read more books on brain teasers to strengthen your imagination. It's peerless twins." Of course, two people are needed to be worthy of the title. In other words, those who practice with him will be augmented by his life providence. Both of their cultivation speeds will increase. Don't you think that your advancement speed has increased in the past 3 months? Ouyang Lan said. There's such a thing. Zhou Wen really didn't know. Furthermore, he had never cultivated with Mingxiu. Instead, it was Feng Qiuyan who practiced with Mingxiu all day. Forget it, forget it. Your emotional intelligence and reaction are just too slow. I have a good relationship with the elders of Mingxiu's family, so if the two of you can get along, I can consider letting the two of you live together in the future and cultivate and grow together, Sis Lan. Thank you for your kind intentions. There's really no need. I'm more used to living alone. Zhou Wen finally understood why Wang Fei had said that the school had designated him as a tutor and that he couldn't reject it. It was Ouyang Lan's arrangement. Unfortunately, he had missed Ouyang Lan's good intentions. Chapter 560. After hanging up the phone, Zhou Wen left Luoyang and rode a qi towards Zhuolu. He had been to Zhuolu once before, so he naturally remembered the way. However, compared to the last time he went, the chances of seeing people outside the city were even lower. Many national roads were already abandoned, and dense plants could be seen everywhere by the roadside. Unless there was a large convoy or a pet convoy passing by, it was very difficult to see lone travelers. Zhou also encountered some breakout creatures on the way. Although they weren't very strong and were only at the legendary stage, this made Zhou even more uneasy. As the breakout creatures became weaker, it was very likely that the sealing effects of the dimensional zones would weaken. Wang Mingyuan had said that the dimensional zones would be completely unsealed in 10 years at most. From the looks of it, it wasn't a lie. The cheese speed was rather fast. Although it wasn't as comfortable as riding a car, it could traverse complicated terrain. It wasn't as easily restricted as a car. Now, many roads had been destroyed by dimensional creatures. It was getting harder and harder for cars to travel outside the city. There were also many vines and other plants that covered the road. Apart from some roads that often had convoys passing by, it was difficult to ensure that the roads were smooth. Zhou wasn't afraid of exhaustion as he traveled day and night. On the third day, he set up a tent and planned on sleeping for a while. Although he was energetic and had endless essence energy, a human's body would still feel tired if it didn't sleep for an extended period of time. As the convoy wouldn't pass by where Zhou was going, there weren't many people on the road. Furthermore, this was a mountain path in a mountainous area, so the chances of encountering people were even lower. Zhou set up a tent on a platform by the side of the road. It just so happened that the area was empty. There was a cliff beside him, so there weren't any obstacles. If any creatures appeared, he could discover them in advance. He summoned Six-Winged, Banana Fairy, Dr. Darkness, and the other companion beasts and got them to guard him. Only then could Zhou sleep in peace. In the middle of the night, Zhou was sleeping soundly when he was suddenly woken up by a pair of tiny hands. When he opened his eyes, he saw Banana Fairy patting his face with her tiny hands. Seeing Zhou wake up, Banana Fairy pulled his hand and pointed outside the tent. "What happened?" Zhou asked Banana Fairy. Banana Fairy babbled, but he couldn't understand what she was saying. It left Zhou somewhat depressed. After all, she was a mythical pet. It had been so long, but she couldn't even learn simple human language. Zhou had no choice but to get up and leave the tent. Six-Winged was sleeping outside the tent, looking even more soundly asleep than Zhou. Dr. Darkness stood at the entrance of the tent, looking completely expressionless as though he was in a daze. These two fellows aren't as reliable as Banana Fairy, Zhou thought to himself. Banana Fairy sat on the banana leaf and flew in the air. She pointed down the cliff and babbled as though she wanted to tell Zhou something. Zhou walked to the edge of the cliff and looked down. Under the moonlight, he saw something glowing in the forest below. The light flashed in a rhythmic manner. It didn't look like a firefly. Firstly, fireflies weren't that big and bright. Secondly, Zhou had never heard of fireflies flashing red. Looking from above, it looked like a red warning light was flashing below. What's down there? Is it a dimensional creature? Although Zhou's eyesight was good, he couldn't see what the red light was from so far away. Banana Fairy pulled Zhou and flew down, as though she wanted Zhou to follow her down to take a look. Zhou hurriedly held back Banana Fairy. The world was too terrifying. Many unknown things could cause people to die without knowing why. It wasn't that Zhou wasn't curious, but he couldn't risk his life with his curiosity. After holding Banana Fairy back, Zhou summoned more than 10 poison bats and got them to fly down to take a look. More than 10 poison bats quickly flew to the forest at the bottom of the cliff and tore apart the trees and vines, making the red light even clearer. Zhou switched to the 8 Perfections wisdom and strengthened his vision. He could vaguely see a red object glowing in the soil of the forest. As it was buried in the soil, only a small portion of it was exposed. Zhou couldn't tell what it was. He ordered the poison bats to dig the soil near the object. More than 10 poison bats sprawled on the ground and stabbed their claws into the soil covered in fallen leaves, digging up the soil. Seeing that the object didn't react, Zhou heaved a sigh of relief. However, he didn't dare be careless. He kept staring at the object and the poison bat. Once the poison bats had any abnormal reactions, he would be able to deal with them immediately. Thankfully, what Zhou expected didn't happen. The dozen or so poison bats dug out a huge hole after digging for a while. The object was also dug out. However, from above, he could only see a red ball with a diameter of more than 4 meters. It was flashing, but he couldn't tell what it was. Before confirming what it was, Zhou didn't dare let the poison bats touch it. After some thought, he put away the tent and other things before calling Six-Winged to fly down the cliff. From the side, it really was a big ball. It looked like a jade stone and was half buried in the soil. The light inside was constantly changing, sometimes strong and sometimes weak. That was why it looked like it was flashing from a distance, but in fact, it was always glowing. Dimensional creature? It doesn't look like it. Companion egg doesn't look like it either. What is this thing? Zhou sized it up for a long time, but he couldn't tell what it was. By the side, Banana Fairy couldn't help but fly above the red ball. Then, she jumped down from the banana leaf and landed on the red ball. She jumped on top of the red ball a few times, and then with a pop, the red ball actually cracked. Zhou jumped in fright, but it was too late to stop it. Thankfully, nothing dangerous happened after the red ball cracked. The red ball turned into a flower after it cracked. The jade-like outer shell was actually its petals. After opening layer by layer, it revealed the pink stamens inside. The glowing thing was the stamens. The moment the flower bloomed, Zhou immediately caught a whiff of a rich floral fragrance. With the augmentation of the 8 perfections wisdom, he found the floral fragrance especially refreshing, relaxing his mind significantly. Banana Fairy had already landed in the stamens. She grabbed a pollen with her tiny hand and placed it in her mouth. She quickly swallowed it as though she was eating cotton candy. There was quite a lot of pollen in the flower. Banana Fairy ate one and grabbed another with both hands. She stuffed them into her mouth, causing her cheeks to bulge. Sogu. Chapter 561. A plant-type dimensional creature? Zhou saw that the flower wasn't abnormal. It hadn't reacted despite being tormented by Banana Fairy's stamen for so long. He felt that this plant-type dimensional creature was somewhat odd. Seeing that Banana Fairy was enjoying herself, Zhou was considering if he should get some pollen to try when he suddenly heard a strange sound nearby. Zhou looked around and his expression changed slightly. He saw snakes, insects, rats, and ants approaching from the nearby forest. Zhou recognized rats, caterpillars, venomous snakes, and centipedes. There were many insects that he didn't recognize at all. These were likely not real dimensional creatures. Most of them were ordinary creatures in the forest. Some were mutated creatures, but they were still lacking from the level of dimensional creatures. They could only be considered mortals. The snakes, insects, rats, and ants scrambled to crawl over. All of them headed for the huge red flower and trampled on each other. Immediately, many creatures were injured or even killed. However, they still charged at the red flower without any regard for their lives, as though they were possessed. It should be the fragrance of the red flower that attracted them, Zhou thought. Many insects flew over from the sky, but before they could get close to the red flower, an even more terrifying creature appeared, scaring the snakes, insects, rats, and ants away. However, they were unwilling to leave, so they wandered around the area. A caterpillar with blue light on its body crawled out of the forest. When the snakes, insects, rats, and ants saw it, they immediately hid far away. They would rather squeeze together and trample on each other than approach it. Even the temptation of the flower's fragrance couldn't stop their fear of the blue light-emitting caterpillar. Another breakout creature. Is there a dimensional zone nearby? When Zhou looked up, he realized that another dimensional creature had appeared. It was a butterfly as large as an immortal crane. Its body and wings were golden, and when it flew, golden fluorescent dust scattered from its body. It was rather eye-catching in the dark night, as though it was flying in a golden galaxy. However, when the golden dust landed on the snakes, insects, rats, and ants, they immediately died. Their bodies also revealed a faint golden color. The blue light caterpillar and the gold dust butterfly both rushed toward the giant red flower. Clearly, they had the same goal. Banana Fairy, who was enjoying the pollen, saw the golden dust butterfly and blue light emitting caterpillar rush over. She reached out and grabbed her banana leaf. Then, she fanned the butterfly and blue light emitting caterpillar twice. The terrifying cold wind immediately blew away the gold dust butterfly and the blue light caterpillar. However, they were not injured and quickly rushed back. The golden dust butterfly pounced at the red flower from the sky as the golden powder on its body constantly scattered. Unfortunately, it encountered Banana Fairy. With a casual wave of Banana Fairy's hand, the golden powder was sent flying along with the butterfly. Wherever the blue glowing caterpillar crawled, the fallen leaves and soil burned, leaving a blue trail on the ground. However, the blue trail didn't look like a real flame. However, it was the same. Before it could approach the red flower, it was blown away by Banana Fairy. Banana Fairy's grand wind was extremely powerful. The two-dimensional creatures were only blown away without suffering any serious injuries. They quickly crawled back, surprising Zhou. As Banana Fairy stuffed the pollen into her mouth, she fanned the banana leaf at the two of them, preventing them from approaching the red flower. Clearly, she was afraid that they would snatch the pollen. Seeing that the blue light-emitting caterpillar and the golden dust butterfly weren't a threat to Banana Fairy, Zhou didn't take action and watched from the side. Apart from these two-dimensional creatures, no other dimensional creatures appeared nearby. Instead, the ordinary snakes, insects, rats, and ants refused to leave, but they didn't dare approach. All they did was watch from the side. The butterfly and caterpillar tried to charge forward many times, but they were blown back by the grand wind. However, they didn't dare give up and continued charging forward. Seemingly bored, Zhou yawned after a while, feeling a little sleepy. Just as he was wondering if he should go back to sleep, he suddenly felt that something was amiss. When he swept his gaze over, he saw that many of the snakes, insects, rats, and ants were lying there motionless as though they were dead. The insects that were flying in the air also staggered and fell from the sky. Zhou took a careful look and realized that they weren't really dead. They were just asleep. Something's wrong. Could it be the effect of the flower's fragrance? Zhou immediately realized the problem. Zhou hurriedly stopped breathing and indeed, he felt his sleepiness lessen significantly. From the looks of it, there should be poison in the flower's fragrance. Thankfully, my poison stat is high enough, so I didn't fall asleep like those snakes, insects, rats, and ants. Zhou saw that Banana Fairy, the butterfly, and the caterpillar weren't affected by the flower's fragrance and were still snatching the pollen. As for the ordinary creatures around him, they had already fallen to the ground and had fallen asleep in a short period of time. Although Zhou wasn't afraid of the flower's fragrance, he felt somewhat bored. He drew his saber and killed the blue light-emitting caterpillar and the golden dust butterfly one by one. The golden dust butterfly didn't leave anything behind. Instead, a sapphire-like bead rolled out of the blue light-emitting caterpillar's body. It was a companion egg. I never expected my luck to be so good. Zhou took out his phone and snapped a picture of the blue light-emitting caterpillar's companion egg. Netherworld Caterpillar. Epic Life Providence. Netherworld Envoy Life Soul. Netherworld Poison Strength. 26 Speed. 28 Constitution. 27 Primordial Energy. 40 Talent Skill. Myriad Poisons Augmentation. Companion Form. Pill. These attributes are quite interesting. Zhou looked at its stats. It was an epic creature with 3 stats below 30, but its primordial energy stat was maxed out. Furthermore, its companion form was something he had never seen before. Zhou thought for a moment before picking up the companion egg and incubating it. Then, he made it a companion form. Soon, a blue lotus seed-like pill appeared in Zhou Wen's hand. It looked like a blue pill. It looked beautiful, but Zhou Wen didn't know what effects it would have if he ate it. What's the use of this thing? I wonder if I can feed it to other dimensional creatures and poison them to death? Zhou Wen put away the pill and planned on giving it a try when he had the chance in the future. Banana Fairy was almost done eating the pollen. Her stomach was bulging, but she had no intention of stopping. She only stopped after finishing the pollen and returned to Zhou Wen's side. Early the next morning, when the sun rose, the morning light shone on the red flower. The flower immediately withered at a speed visible to the naked eye. Not long after, it turned into ashes on the ground, annihilated just like that, leaving only a red crystal on the ground. Sogu. Chapter 562. Before Zhou Wen could see what the red crystal was, Banana Fairy had already flown over and blew at it. The red crystal flew up and automatically landed in her mouth. The red crystal melted in her mouth and was swallowed by Banana Fairy. She licked her lips as though she hadn't had enough. Only then did the sleeping snakes, worms, rats, and ants wake up. Instantly, they scattered and returned to the forest. Seeing that there was nothing else, Zhou Wen set off again and headed for Zhuolu. It had only been a few months, but this path was very different from the last time he took it. He hadn't seen so many breakout creatures the last time he took it, but now, he often saw them. Although they were low-level dimensional creatures, it also indicated that the dimensional zone's sealing power was rapidly weakening. When Zhou Wen arrived at Zhuolu again, he didn't head to the encampment. Instead, he headed straight for the battlefield, circled around the soldiers stationed there, and arrived at the entrance of the ruins. At the entrance of the underground ruins, Zhou Wen didn't see a chariot. For some reason, there were chariots in reality, but there weren't any in-game. Zhou Wen hadn't found a chariot despite grinding the Zhuolu instance dungeon so many times. After entering the underground ruins, Zhou Wen was already very familiar with the path. After passing through the maze-like underground tunnels, Zhou Wen arrived at where the longevity tree was. There was no longevity tree in-game, but in reality, the longevity tree was still there. The fruits on the tree were the same as the ones Zhou Wen had seen previously. They hadn't been touched. He shone his phone at it again, but there was still no reaction. He knew that it was impossible to store the longevity tree into his phone. This longevity tree is so similar to the Dead Man tree, but it can't be displayed in-game. I wonder what its origins are. Zhou Wen looked at the baby-like fruits on the longevity tree. Although he knew that eating them would give him immense strength, he wasn't willing to try. Lord Alcohol's outcome was right in front of him. There were definitely huge latent dangers if he ate it. Unable to store the longevity tree, Zhou Wen was about to leave when he suddenly felt a burning sensation from a tattoo on his body. It was demonic neonate throbbing. Zhou Wen's heart stirred as he summoned demonic neonate. The moment demonic neonate landed, she ran towards the longevity tree. Without waiting for Zhou Wen to call her, she had already jumped onto the longevity tree and opened her mouth to bite the fruit. Crack! Kacha! One fruit was swallowed by the demonic infant in 2 or 3 mouthfuls. However, the demonic infant didn't stop there. Instead, it went for another fruit. Zhou Wen was alarmed. Ever since demonic neonate was born, she hadn't eaten or drunk anything. Zhou Wen fed her the best epic companion egg, but she remained unmoved. She even showed disdain. Zhou Wen originally imagined that she didn't eat at all, but to his surprise, she started eating when she saw the fruits of the longevity tree. In just moments, she had swallowed 3 to 4 fruit. Back then, Lord Alcohol had only eaten 1 fruit, but his body had already rejuvenated and he had nearly broken through to the mythical stage. Now, demonic neonate had eaten 3 or 4 fruits, but she still seemed fine. She was still crawling around the tree in search of fruits to eat. The longevity tree was a terrifying mythical creature. It easily turned Lord Alcohol into fertilizer. Demonic neonate jumped around its body and ate many fruits, but the longevity tree didn't react at all. Zhou stared at the longevity tree for a long time and thought to himself, "Don't tell me this tree is waiting for demonic neonate to finish eating before dealing with her?" Zhou stood far away and braced himself. As long as the longevity tree stirred, he would immediately unsummon demonic neonate and escape. Zhou didn't wish to take the risk of fighting such a strange thing since he wasn't in a game. However, the situation Zhou imagined didn't happen. Demonic neonate jumped around the longevity tree and ate many longevity fruits, but the longevity tree didn't react at all. Demonic neonate had already eaten more than 10 longevity fruit. She wanted to eat more, but she suddenly fell from the longevity tree, giving Zhou a fright. He immediately summoned her back. Demonic neonate transformed into a stream of light and returned to Zhou's body. Zhou felt that demonic neonate's tattoo kept burning like red-hot iron. It was so hot that Zhou nearly cried out. All he could do was summon her again. Demonic neonate landed in front of Zhou. The longevity tree in the distance didn't move, allowing Zhou to heave a sigh of relief. He hurriedly checked demonic neonate's body. Her tiny face was flushed red, and white steam was emitting from her body like steam. However, demonic neonate's aura was very uniform. It didn't seem like there was anything wrong with her. Instead, the essence energy in her body kept surging, as though she was about to advance. "Don't tell me she's about to advance to the legendary stage?" Zhou felt that it was highly likely, but he didn't know what changes demonic neonate would undergo when she advanced to the legendary stage. She already had a life providence, life soul, and wheel of life souls. If she advanced to the legendary stage again, it was unknown if she would condense a new life providence. The white steam on demonic neonate's body increased, enveloping her body. The temperature inside was astonishingly high. Zhou could only watch from the side, unable to do anything. If those longevity fruits can really allow demonic neonate to evolve, I might as well pluck them and leave them for her. Many thoughts flashed through Zhou's mind as he looked at the longevity tree. It was impossible for him to eat that thing, so he hadn't had any thoughts about the longevity tree in the past. However, since demonic neonate was willing to eat it, he couldn't sit back and do nothing. After some thought, Zhou summoned a poison bat to see if it could pluck the longevity fruit. The poison bat flapped its wings and flew over. Just as it approached the longevity tree, before it could pluck the fruit, it suddenly saw a tree root burrow out from the ground. Like a worm, it wrapped around the poison bat's body and pulled it underground. Then there was nothing else. From the looks of it, that fruit isn't something anyone can pluck. Zhou summoned a few other companion beasts, but the outcome was the same. Just as they approached the longevity tree, they were killed by it. They couldn't even touch the tree, much less the longevity fruit. Zhou didn't wish to touch the longevity fruit himself, nor was he willing to risk his mythical pet. All he could do was wait for demonic neonate to complete her evolution. If it really didn't work, he could get demonic neonate to pluck it herself and take it all away. They would be her food in the future. After a while, the white gas on demonic neonate's body gradually dissipated. Her body temperature also slowly dropped, but it didn't seem like there were any special changes to her body. She was still tiny, and she was still hugging the ancient sword. After demonic neonate fully recovered, she stood up and looked in the direction of the longevity tree. However, she seemed hesitant and didn't immediately go over. "If you can't eat it now, why don't you pluck the fruit first? I'll help you keep it?" Zhou suggested. Chapter 563. Demonic neonate thought for a moment and felt that it was feasible. She nodded her tiny head. Zhou was delighted as he hurriedly took out a large cloth bag from the chaos space and handed it to demonic neonate. He patted her head and said, "Try your best to pluck more fruits. I'll leave them for you. You can eat them whenever you want in the future." Demonic neonate was too short, so she could only drag the cloth bag to the dead man tree. Zhouwen held the bamboo blade and stared at the longevity tree. If the longevity tree made any abnormal movements, he could react immediately. However, Zhouwen's worries were unnecessary. The longevity tree seemed to treat demonic neonate exceptionally well. It allowed demonic neonate to pluck the longevity fruits from its body without any reaction. Demonic neonate was even more greedy than Zhouwen. Regardless of their size, she plucked them all. Regardless of whether they were ripe or not, she stuffed them all into the cloth bag. As expected of an existence with a supreme true demon life soul. She is indeed greedy and ruthless. Zhouwen wasn't surprised that demonic neonate had dared to bite him and Xia Xianyue when she was alive. Zhouwen saw that there were dozens of fruits on the tree that had been plucked by demonic neonate. If the energy of a longevity fruit was at the peak of the epic stage and was close to the mythical stage, these fruits were impressive. Demonic neonate finished plucking all the longevity fruits and stuffed a huge cloth bag into it. Only then did she drag the cloth bag back and place it in front of Zhouwen, indicating for him to help her put it away. Alright, I'll help you put it away first. Zhouwen picked up the cloth bag and threw it into the chaos space. He glanced at the bare longevity tree and thought to himself, I wonder when this longevity tree will grow new fruit. I'll bring demonic neonate to pluck the fruits when the time comes. After putting away the items, Zhouwen unsummoned demonic neonate. At the same time, he switched on his phone and looked at demonic neonate's stats. Demonic neonate, legendary, evolvable, life providence, son of dimension life soul, supreme true demon wheel of destiny, 1 spin strength, 21 speed, 21 constitution, 21 essence energy, 21 talent skill, demonic sword companion form. Non-demonic neonate's stats disappointed Zhouwen. Apart from its stats increasing to 21, there were no other changes. It was identical to before. How could this be? It's clearly so special, so why isn't it much different from ordinary mythical creatures after advancing? Zhouwen looked around and felt that the problem most likely stemmed from her wheel of destiny. The wheel of destiny of other mythical creatures were all sorts of miracles. Even a mythical creature like the 6-winged guardian dragon, which wasn't considered strong, had the miraculous ability of a death substitute. However, demonic neonate's wheel of destiny didn't seem to have any miraculous powers. There was no explanation for the words, first revolution. Demonic neonate had a life providence, life soul, and wheel of life soul from the beginning. This means that she has long evolved to the mythical stage. However, for some reason, she returned to the mortal stage and needs to evolve again. According to the literal meaning of her wheel of destiny, does this mean that she has evolved again? If that was the case, then what was the benefit of her re-evolution? My life providence didn't increase, nor did my stats increase. If there are any benefits, I'm afraid it's most likely related to the wheel of destiny. Zhouwen couldn't figure it out either. He probably had to wait for her to advance to the mythical stage before he knew what secrets her wheel of destiny had. All he could do was ignore it for now. Even without miracles, demonic neonate was already rather strong with just the demonic sword. After leaving the area where the longevity tree was, Zhouwen passed through the poison bat cave and arrived at the underground sea. He didn't dare provoke the black dragon that was pulling the carriage, but the black dragon was restrained and couldn't catch up to him. Soon, Zhouwen crossed the underground sea. He arrived in front of the temple without any danger. After all, Zhouwen had already grinded the Zhuolu underground ruins countless times. Unless there was something outside the game, nothing could harm him. When he arrived outside the temple, Zhouwen saw the chariot. It was parked in front of the temple's entrance, and people were moving things onto it. Some of them were wearing military uniforms, while others were wearing ordinary exploration suits or companion armors. Judging from their age, they should be the experts. Who is it? When Zhouwen approached, he was immediately discovered by them. The soldiers raised their weapons and aimed them at him. "Commander Lu, it's me," Zhou said when he saw that one of them was an acquaintance. Lu Yunxian recognized Zhou voice and went forward to take a closer look. He was immediately overjoyed when he recognized Zhou. "Young Master One, put down your weapons. We're on the same side." "Young Master One, why are you here alone? Didn't Adjutant An come with you?" Lu Yunxian and Zhou had gone through thick and thin together, so their relationship was naturally better than ordinary people. He welcomed Zhou and spoke warmly. "No, Ah Xing can't come because he has something to do. I came alone." Zhou looked at the entrance of the temple and asked, "How's the situation inside?" "It's not optimistic. The experts have studied it for a long time and have determined some of Torch Dragon and Qiongqi's skills. However, knowing these skills alone won't be enough to deal with them. We have attempted to use companion beasts to explore, but they are basically instantly killed. Only some companion beasts that are smaller than worms can live longer and obtain some information." Lu Yunxian introduced the situation to Zhou. "Commander Lu, this is?" An expert walked over and sized up Zhou. "Professor Lei, let me introduce you. This is Zhou, Madame Lan's son. Previously, he was able to open the temple's door thanks to Young Master when finding the stone artifact. Young Master Wen, this is Professor Lei Jigua, a professor of folklore. Professor Lei is now in charge of the temple's research." Lu Yunxian introduced the two. Lei Jigua nodded and said to Zhou, "Zhou, it's too dangerous for you to take the cave passageway alone. Don't take the cave passageway when you return. Follow the chariot." Lei Jigua imagined that Zhou had come through the passageway that Lord Alcohol and company had found. He didn't know that Zhou had traversed the underground sea without the chariot. "I don't plan on returning. I want to take a look at the temple," Zhou said. No. The situation inside the temple hasn't been figured out. It's too dangerous to enter the temple." Lei Jigua rejected him immediately. "Haven't we already conquered the front temple? I'll just go there to take a look. There won't be any danger." Zhou didn't wish to complicate matters. He planned on entering the temple first. Passing through the Aoyin stone statue requires offerings to appease it. It's not easy to make a round trip here. It's also very troublesome to transport the offerings. There aren't many offerings left here. It's only enough for one use. Lei Jigua still didn't agree. After a pause, he said, "If you really want to enter, wait another 2 days. In 2 days, we will begin the next round of research. When the time comes, you can enter with us." What Lei Jigua said was indeed reasonable, but Zhou wasn't willing to wait another 2 days. Chapter 564. I'll think of a way to get the offerings myself. "Commander Lu, please take me in to take a look," Zhou said to Lu Yunxian. Before Lu Yunxian could say a word, Lei Jigua shook his head and said, "I'm in charge of this place. I have to ensure the safety of all of you. If you want to go, wait another 2 days. Otherwise, I won't let you in no matter what." Lei Jigua was just too stubborn. Zhou and Lu Yunxian couldn't convince him. Furthermore, he was in charge here, so Zhou couldn't force his way in. "All right, let's wait another 2 days." Zhou thought that although he had already killed Torch Dragon youngling a few times on the way, it wasn't a bad thing to kill it a few more times to familiarize himself with it. Therefore, he agreed to wait 2 days before following them into the temple. Zhou had recently farmed Torch Dragon youngling, Medusa, and Golden Battle God Halberd a few times, but the drop rate wasn't as high as Xing had said. Most of the items that dropped were stat crystals. Occasionally, a primordial energy skill crystal would drop, but due to his stats, Zhou couldn't learn it or take it out. All he could do was endure the pain of having it respawn. Up to now, the only companion egg that had dropped was the Golden Battle God Halberd. "Young Master One, the conditions here are a little worse. Why don't you rest in my tent first?" Lu Yunxian led Zhou to his tent. Lu Yunxian wasn't living alone. Due to the limited space, a tent typically had 3 people living in it. Lu Yunxian's tent originally had 2 people, so it was perfect for Zhou to have one more. The two of them chatted for a while about what had happened after they parted ways. Lu Yunxian spoke more while Zhou listened silently most of the time. Lu Yunxian had been stationed at the ruins the entire time. He was in charge of clearing dimensional creatures and ensuring the safety of these experts. The comrades who had followed him had all been transferred away. Most of them had been promoted and assigned to other places. As the two of them chatted, a middle-aged man in his 30s walked in. Lu Yunxian introduced, "Young Master Wen, this is Professor Lei's student Chu Qingyun. He's also an expert in folklore. He gave us many valuable suggestions while studying Torch Dragon and Qiongqi." Lu Yunxian introduced Zhou to Chu Qingyun. Chu Qingyun only said a few polite words before going to bed. Clearly, he had no interest in chatting with Zhou and company. Zhou and Lu Yunxian didn't want to disturb him, so they walked outside the tent and rested after returning. The next day, when Zhou and company woke up, they heard a commotion outside. When they went out to take a look, they saw that the logistics team had delivered supplies. Everyone was busy moving things. Chu Qingyun also walked out of the tent. When he saw a figure in the supply team, his eyes immediately lit up. He smiled and greeted her. "Head Nurse Su, why did you come by yourself? It's so dangerous here. There's a batch of newly made medicine here, and someone needs to inject it into the soldiers. I was afraid that they would get the dosage wrong, so I came myself." Su exchanged a few words with Chu Qingyun before looking at Lu Yunxian. She immediately saw Zhou standing beside Lu Yunxian and immediately revealed a look of delight. "Young Master Wen, when did you come to Zhuolu? Why didn't I see you at the encampment?" Su quickly walked towards Zhou and asked in pleasant surprise. "I didn't go to the encampment and went straight to the ruins. I originally wanted to take a look before leaving, but I was delayed by some matters. I'll have to stay for another 2 days," Zhou said. "Young Master Wen, that's not right of you. Since you're already here in Zhuolu, how can you not visit us?" Su was the same as Lu Yunxian. They had gone through thick and thin with Zhou, so their feelings for him weren't something ordinary comrades could compare to. Chu Qingyun couldn't help but frown slightly when he saw Su and Zhou being so friendly, but he didn't say a word. "Su, go and inject the soldiers first. Young Master will still be here for 2 more days. It won't be too late to catch up later," Lu Yunxian said with a smile. "All right, I'll get to work first. Young Master let's have a good chat later." Su returned to busy herself. "You can go ahead with your work." Zhou's mood improved significantly. To be able to meet a friend who treated him sincerely in such a dark place made him feel better than obtaining a treasure. 2 days passed quickly. During this period, Zhou grinded the Torch Dragon youngling twice. Although it was very dangerous each time, Zhou was confident that he could safely kill the Torch Dragon youngling. Professor Lei and company were already prepared. They brought Zhou with them and entered the temple. Even Su followed Lu Yunxian in. There's danger at every step in the temple. The danger is unimaginable. Remember not to act on your own. You must abide by the arrangements, or you will harm yourself and others. Lei Zhiguo was a little worried about Zhou as he repeatedly exhorted him. "I understand," Zhou agreed seriously. Only then did Lei Zhiguo feel a little more at ease. He was afraid that Zhou was the kind of young master who would disregard everything when his temper flared. Unbeknownst to him, Zhou's understanding of the temple far exceeded his. Under the lead of Lei Zhiguo and the other experts and professors, Zhou and company finally headed for the passageway where the Aoyin stone statue was. "Head Nurse Su, the Aoyin stone statue is extremely evil. If you touch it, it will injure others. Follow me. If there's any danger, I can protect you," Chu Qingyun said as he walked beside Su. Anyone could tell that Chu Qingyun was interested in Su-won. Su-won shook her head slightly and said, "Mr. Chu, you must be joking. I'm a soldier. Protecting you is my duty." Chu Qingyun said with a smile, "You're naturally protecting me outside, but in a place like this, there are many problems that can't be resolved with force. I should be the one to guarantee your safety." After a pause, Chu Qingyun continued, "Just like this Aoyin stone statue, even if the overseer comes personally, he probably won't be able to do anything to it. He has to sacrifice his blood to pass safely." Chu Qingyun kept trying to show off, but he didn't know that Su-won wasn't a woman who lacked a sense of security. On the contrary, she was a qualified soldier. Chu Qingyun's words were actually questioning her ability and integrity as a soldier. This naturally made Su-won unhappy, but she didn't say a word. Lu Yunxian, who was walking at the back, whispered to Zhou-won, "Chu Qingyun was born into a wealthy family. His family background isn't inferior to the family's, and he's rather talented. Unfortunately, he's too conceited. He's not the type that Su-won likes. I'm afraid he'll be wasting his effort." Zhou-won nodded slightly. Even someone with low emotional intelligence like Zhou-won could tell that Su-won didn't have a good impression of him. When everyone arrived in front of the Aoyin stone statue, Lei Zhigua got Chu Qingyun to use living creatures as sacrifices to the Aoyin stone statue. Zhou-won was naturally no stranger to this method. He was the one who had told Sheng about it. "All right, everyone, please come this way." After Chu Qingyun paid his respects to the Aoyin stone statue, he walked towards the Cheongqi temple. Chapter 565. Zhou-won, who was walking behind, said to Lu Yunxian and Su-won, "I want to see Torch Dragon, so I won't be going with you to Cheongqi." "We'll go with you," Su-won said. Although their conversation was very soft, it still attracted Chu Qingyun's attention. "Didn't Professor Lei already say that you have to obey the arrangements after entering? You can't wander around randomly. Do you have a death wish?" The moment Chu Qingyun said that, Professor Lei and company turned their heads and looked at them. "What's going on?" Professor Lei came over and asked. "Professor Lei, I came here to take a look at the Torch Dragon Temple. I won't be going to the Cheongqi Temple. Now that we have offerings, it shouldn't be a problem to go anywhere, right?" Zhou-won said. Professor Lei pondered for a moment and said, "Although that's the case in theory, the temple is strange and bizarre. Anything can happen. It's best not to split up. If anything happens, we can still think of a solution together. Why don't we head to the Torch Dragon Temple to take a look after we're done here?" Zhou-won shook his head and said, "Those offerings can only maintain stability for less than an hour. By the time you return from the Cheongqi Temple, I'm afraid there won't be much time left. I'll go by myself. I'm just taking a look. Nothing will happen. Pretend to know when you don't. The offerings we provide can last for at least 2 hours. If you don't understand, don't spout nonsense," Chu Qingyun said with a sneer. "More than 2 hours? Professor Lei, is that true?" Zhou-won ignored Chu Qingyun's sarcasm and asked Professor Lei with a frown. "That's right. For safety reasons, the offerings we provide each time have to last for more than 2 hours. And the working time has to be limited to an hour and a half. We can end work early today and take you to the Torch Dragon Temple to take a look," Professor Lei said. "Professor Lei, I think it's best if you check the offerings again. I'm sure that your offerings can only last for an hour and a half. If you really want to stay inside for an hour and a half, I'm afraid it will be very difficult for you to come out alive," Zhou-won said seriously. Chu Qingyun said with a sneer, "The amount of offerings has been strictly calculated. There has never been a mistake. How can a layman like you be so sure?" The offering was personally placed by Chu Qingyun. If Zhou-won said that there was a problem with the offering, wouldn't that mean that Chu Qingyun had made a mistake? Su-won couldn't help but speak up for Zhou-won. Young Master Wen isn't someone who speaks without reason. He definitely has his reasons for saying that there's a problem. What's the point? Could it be that the results of our plan with so many experts would be wrong? Chu Qingyun said disdainfully. Professor Lei pondered for a moment before asking Zhou Wen, why did you say that the offering can only last for an hour? Professor Lei, the blood you used for the blood sacrifice was obtained from the poison bat, right? Zhou Wen asked after some thought. That's right. In the past, we used live sacrifices. Later, we realized that fresh blood could also be used. Because it's too difficult to catch a live poison bat, we're now using blood as a representative. The dosage is precisely calculated, so there's usually no mistake, Professor Lei said. There's nothing wrong with the quantity, but there's something wrong with the blood. The bat's blood isn't pure. It's been mixed with something else, so the time it can last will be much shorter than you expected. After Zhou Wen said that, he looked at Lu Yunxian and said, Yunxian, this shouldn't be a coincidence. Investigate everyone related to this matter carefully. Someone might have tampered with it. Do you think there's a problem just because you say so? Chu Qingyun still felt that Zhou Wen was being unreasonable because Professor Lei didn't let him go to the Torch Dragon Temple. Zhou Wen, how do you know that the bat's blood is mixed with something else? This is a very serious problem, Professor Lei asked Zhou Wen with a heavy expression. Professor Lei, adjutant and was the one who told you about the live sacrifice, right? Zhou Wen asked. Yes. Professor Lei nodded. I was the one who told adjutant on this method, Zhou Wen said. You really dare to say anything? How many times have you been to the temple? How dare you say that you discovered the method of living sacrifice? Why don't you say that you also discovered a way to kill mythical creatures? Chu Qingyun curled his lips. This matter is very important, but the blood has already been absorbed by the Aoyin stone statue. There's no way to test it now. Professor Lei looked at the Aoyin stone statue and pondered for a moment before saying, safety first. Since Zhou Wen said that there's a problem with the blood, let's temporarily cancel this research. Teacher, why do you have to listen to a layman's nonsense? We've used it so many times without any problems. Why is there a problem with the blood the moment he comes? Isn't this nonsense? If we waste this sacrifice, it will take us a few days to get the bat's blood again. We won't be able to do anything for the next few days, Chu Qingyun said unhappily. However, Professor Lei insisted, safety first. Since there are doubts, we can't take the risk regardless of whether it's true or not. With Professor Lei saying so, what else could Chu Qingyun say? All he could do was sulk. Since you said that the sacrificial artifact can last for about an hour, since we have given up on our plans today, let's go to the Torch Dragon Temple to take a look. It'll only take about 10 minutes to return. Even if there's a problem with the blood, it won't be a problem, Professor Lei said to Zhou Wen. Zhou Wen thought to himself, I'm going to kill Torch Dragon. If I bring you along, I'm afraid Torch Dragon will be able to kill all of you in one go. Professor Lei, it's best you go to the Qiongqi Temple for research. I'll go to the Torch Dragon Temple myself, Zhou Wen said to Professor Lei. Chu Qingyun immediately said angrily, the person who said that there's a problem with the sacrificial artifact and can't go is you. Now you are the one who wants to go. Whether it's a god or a ghost, it's all up to you. Professor Lei frowned as well. If it's really as you said, the sacrificial artifact can only maintain the stability of the passageway for less than an hour. Our preparation work will take more than half an hour. There's no point in going. Zhou Wen didn't say a word. He looked at the Aoyin stone statue and walked in front of it. Everyone didn't know what he was up to as they looked at him. Chu Qingyun opened his mouth to say something, but before he could say anything, he saw Zhou Wen stand in front of the Aoyin stone statue. The bamboo blade in his hand suddenly unsheathed. Everyone was given a fright. It wasn't that they hadn't tried to destroy the Aoyin stone statue, but they ended up suffering heavy losses. Inside the temple, the Aoin stone statue was augmented by some kind of power. Even if there were many epic companion beasts attacking it, it could devour them in one gulp. If Zhouwen were to alarm the Aoin stone statue, they would probably die. Someone wanted to stop Zhouwen, but before they could open their mouths, the bamboo blade in Zhouwen's hand flashed and returned to its scabbard. Boom! Under Professor Lei's shocked gaze, the Aoin stone statue split into two and collapsed to the sides. You probably won't need the sacrificial artifact for the time being, Zhouwen said as he took 2 steps back. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.